Anything from the summit of Everest.
How about Hadrian's Wall? Got that?
No.
I've got some Etna ash if you want.
I've got some Etna. I've been to the summit of Etna.
Ah, me too.
Oh,
That's where I got it, funnily enough.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah, me too.
There we are. Well, the travels of Alex Phillips and Mike Graham. There could be another show. We're going to do Talk History. We've already decided we're going to do a new station to teach history to people who are not getting taught properly in school.
Proper history.
Yeah, proper history.
Happened
British
when
history.
When we ran everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And the world was better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. I'll be seeing you. I'm not back until next year, by the way, but I'll see you on Friday. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after Alex Phillips next.
Spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Last few days of 2024. I'm going to be with you from 10 till 1 today, tomorrow, and on Wednesday to see in the new year. But after that, I'm off ski. I'm going to sunnier climes. But you do have me for 3 days, and you do have me for 3 hours over the course of those 3 days here on Talk. DAB Plus Radio, of course, on YouTube, on your smart speaker, and on your connected device. Now, coming up on today's show. Well, Labour plans to make the national curriculum more diverse. That's right. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, given that she hasn't ruined the education space enough already, has decided to launch a review to update what is taught in schools, making it compulsory. That's right, compulsory for all state schools, including academies that could choose to try and opt out of her diversification of the curriculum. Nobody wants it. It's going to be a disaster. At least 3 people have died off Calais while attempting to cross to England. 7 others are requiring intensive care. This is after a boat packed with Sudanese was stormed by Syrians. And the pilot of a Jeju airplane that crashed in South Korea after a bird strike declared Mayday minutes before the crash, with only 2 of the 181 people on board surviving. There have been a bit of a litany of air accidents over the past few days. I don't know if you've been sort of following that or not. We've had an incident in Canada. We've had this incident in Korea. The incident, of course, in Kazakhstan before that. What is going on? We're going to be speaking to an expert. And Elon Musk has blasted Sir Keir Starmer on Twitter, claiming that very few businesses want to invest in Britain under his regime. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of Common Sense. I'm pleased to say that joining me is Sam Armstrong, commentator and a recovered sickly individual, because the last time you were in the studio, you're wheezing and coughing and streaming and, frankly, not looking in your rudest of health, but you look...
back to my fighting, ranting self.
Yeah, rosy-cheeked and in good form. Was that all the Christmas booze that's given you a bit of...
It doesn't hurt, does it?
It doesn't hurt.
You never drink as much port and other fortified wines as this time of year, do you?
Fortified, that is the word for extra fortification. Lean on the liver, I say. Let it do the heavy lifting over the festive period. Now, let's first of all start off by talking about... Well, it's ominous, isn't it? Unpredictable. The Labour Party wants to make the national curriculum more diverse. This is according to The Telegraph, who have seen plans coming out of the Department for Education that they want to overhaul what's taught in schools to create a curriculum that reflects the diversities of our society and help young people appreciate the diversity of Britain. And apparently they want to decolonise subjects, we've heard this before, that have been branded too monocultural. The problem is, though, of course, is when you look at the current curriculum, I think we do a fair amount of diversification. Perhaps what would be quite revolutionary is to look at the population of the United Kingdom and go, oh, right, I see, we're majority Anglo-Saxon British. Well, let's focus on that then, shall we?
Yeah, the idea that British schools should be teaching British history is not controversial. That is basic common sense. And of course, we do learn about all sorts of histories and cultures around the world in religious education, history, geography, of course, and all the rest of it. But look, let's be clear what schools are meant to be there to be doing, which is to be educating our children to go into the workplace, to have all of the opportunities set up to succeed in the future. And look, Labour isn't just decolonising the curriculum, it's forcing each and every school in the country to go out and teach it. And at the moment, you don't have to. If you're an academy school, you can teach your own curriculum, and some of them are doing it. And what Labour could have done is gone out to the top 10 performing schools in the country and said, look, clearly you're doing something right. How can we copy it? And that's not a right-wing thing. By the way, over 5 of the top 10 schools in the country are Muslim schools in this country.
Is that right?
By Progress 8 schools, yeah. Over 5 of them are Muslim. But they haven't done that. Instead, what they've done is they've appointed a feminist, intersectionalist, race-baiting academic to conduct a review. Now, this is someone who went to war with Tony Blair for being overly focused on academic achievement at school. This is someone who hates the idea that school is focused on academic achievement. They've put her in charge of rewriting the entire curriculum, and then, once you've got this low ambition, low achievement, low success academic to have written her woke curriculum, what's she going to do? She's going to force the likes of the Michaela Academy in Wembley, which has got the highest scores, bar none, deals with incredibly deprived children in a really tough neighbourhood. She's going to force that school to teach her curriculum. Why? Because the success of schools like that enforce discipline, that teach British values, that do all of the basics that many of our listeners will have done when they were growing up, the success of those schools is an affront, it is an insult, and it is a threat to Labour's socialist agenda for our country.
What I think alarms a lot of people, I looked at some polling the other day, it sort of crept up during my doom scrolling about the demographic changes in attitudes. And the question posed across age ranges was along the lines of, do you think people from minority backgrounds should be given preferential treatment in the jobs market? And over the course of time, it's now got to the stage that most people in the younger demographic say, yes, they should. And the problem I have with this is, again, with the sort of wanting to rewrite or decolonise a curriculum, a lot of it is now tilting towards white hatred. That's the problem I have. A lot of it is now tilted towards actually pointing a finger, an accusatory finger, at the majority of the population and saying, your ancestors were evil, therefore you should be punished. And that is so dangerous.
Well, and it's not just dangerous societally, and indeed it is. Why on earth should white working-class boys, who, by the way, are the least successful students, bar none, at our schools at the moment, they're the students that are being failed consistently, have been for a very long time, why should they be told that they're the unjust inheritors of a success to which they know nothing? But look, it's also not going to work out for the left, and we're seeing this all across the world. White boys, in particular boys, that are told that they are the very bottom of society are beginning to rebel because now they have sources like the new media. Now they can go online, can see voices that are telling them, actually, do you know what? No, you're not the problem. Let me tell you about what Western civilization used to look like. And it is no surprise to me that starting in this country, but already going across in Europe and certainly in the United States, white young men in particular are beginning to vote for candidates on the right and on the populist right in particular. And those on the left ought to be very careful. If you tell a significant proportion of this country that they are worthless, that they have robbed their way to everything that they have got, that they deserve nothing for years, and they have access, as they do now, to a source of information that tells them the truth, that tells them, no, this isn't actually what happened, then they will begin to rebel, firstly through the ballot box, and beyond that, who knows?
What they might want to teach is the basics of Newton's laws of physics, which is every force has an equal and opposite force. And if you ram down people's throats this very divisive, racist curriculum where everything is seen through the prism of skin colour, accusation, colonialism, then what you create is something equal in the opposite direction. People call it the woke right, don't they? This emergence of a new tier of people who actually sort of, teeter on the brink or fully immerse themselves in conspiracy theory and are then minded to adopt quite hateful ideologies. But that is in direct response to what is essentially an uptick in hateful ideologies coming from the extreme left. And the fact that you've got Bridget Phillipson, who seems to want to, by law, enshrine some of this stuff into our curriculum. There's a fantastic study that's done by Rutgers University about a month or so ago, where it looked at critical race theories being taught to adults and diversity training. Apparently we've got more DEI officers in the UK per capita than any other country, 10,000. But based on the size of our population, it is we're top of the table, woohoo! What they did is they sat people down with this DEI training, where a lot of it is based upon the sort of the mantras of critical race theory. And having had two test groups, one lot had the training, the others didn't. They then put them in front of various scenarios where they had to say how they would respond. What they found is the ones who had the DEI training were far more sympathetic with punitive authoritarianism and far more likely to pick responses to scenarios that were nasty, that were harmful. And this is essentially now what's being woven into our curriculum. It's terrifying, frankly. It's terrifying. And I think what this will lead to is more and more parents saying, we're just going to take our children out of school. We're going to do homeschooling.
The only thing is, what was Bridget Phillipson's last act? To whack VAT 20% price hike on private schools. And there are some private schools around the country, by the way, that can charge relatively low fees, right? There's some up in the West Midlands, Dudley, that charge deliberately low fees, just trying to provide a traditional classical education to give parents a choice out of it. And for many parents who are desperate for their children to get a good start in life, to go out, to get qualifications so they can have a job, perhaps a better job than they've had for themselves, they were scrimping and saving and fighting and earning every little extra piece of overtime they possibly could in order to get them into that school. And what has Bridget Phillips have done? She has pulled up the ladder from beneath them. This is a government that is hell-bent on pushing this down our throats. And this is the thing about this policy that really rankles the most. It's not just that she's changing the national curriculum. She's the Education Secretary. She's entitled to do that. She's forcing every single academy, every single free school set up on independent ethos to push a particular educational philosophy and approach to follow her curriculum. She's pushing kids out of private schools. And this is the thing with Labour. It's not enough for them to be right? They have to force you. They have to force you to suck it up. It's the same thinking that ran through the Soviet Union, sticking walls around Berlin. And I apologise for putting it that highly, but for locking people in. It's when people vote with their feet, when people choose to disobey independently, they can't cope with it.
The problem with this, of course, is when you look at, I mean, because she's also got the Free Speech on Campus Act, the very first thing she did when she became Education Secretary, which enshrines the ability of people to voice opinions on campus that other people might say, oh, it's triggering me. Basically, just right-wing, commonsensical opinions, as far as I can tell. But when the Labour Party follow this agenda of cultural Marxism, the Conservative Party would just say, let schools be schools, focus on the 3 Rs and things like that, targets, attainments, achievements. The Labour Party are desperate to force people, brainwash people, indoctrinate people into a very narrow and, I think, carcinogenic ideology. And the problem is, when they, even if we get rid of them in 5 years' time, she will ram this through, and we're going to have a subset, a generation of children who have been spoon-fed some extremely harmful content. And it's very difficult with children with their plastic minds at a later age, if they then go on to these universities where free speech is no longer allowed. It's very difficult to imagine they're going to develop into adults with the wherewithal to become our future leaders. We now learn as well that young women are more likely to be out of work on sick leave than with children. This is sort of two stories in one here, which is what women aren't having children anymore, which is very problematic. No one's had a neonatalist policy for years. Also, we keep talking about it in the framework of women. A lot of the fault, I think, lies with men. Men have become increasingly irresponsible and don't want to be tied down in relationships and to families, and we need to talk about that. But also the idea here that the majority of people who are on sick leave now are the young people. It's 16 to 24-year-olds. And when you look about these people on sick leave, 42% of young people are not at work because of a mental health problem. I'm sorry, there's no such thing. You can't catch a mental health problem. It's not contagious. If anything, going into the workplace is probably the cure for a mental health problem. We've got a big issue here and no one's being firm enough to tackle it.
Well, and this is a huge thing. Look, we all know people that struggle with the challenges and the difficulties that come with ordinary and normal life. The best antidote to those challenges are the following: routine, socialisation, having a purpose in life, going out and doing something constructive, having something to build towards. All of those things are inexorably better delivered in the workplace than they are on benefits, right? But we have deluded ourselves into believing that it is somehow compassionate that when a young person, and it's particularly egregious with young people, comes into a doctor's office or comes into a welfare office and presents themselves and says, I have depression. We've deluded ourselves to think it's compassionate to say, here's a cheque of taxpayers' money, just come in every week and collect it, rather than turning around to that young person and saying, do you know what you need? You need to get a new job.
Get a grip, roll your sleeves up,
see some
get
friends.
out and work, go see your friends, earn some money. And the other thing that we need to talk about, which frankly we're not doing enough, is the neurological rewiring that social media is having. It's not a coincidence that so many young people especially have mental health problems because, frankly speaking, sitting there and just scrolling through video after video after video, thumbnail, 30 seconds here, 13 seconds there, and getting these hits every time, these sort of rushes of whether it be dopamine, whether it be adrenaline, whatever the hormonal endocrinological reaction is to the content that one is reviewing, whether or not it's a triggering news item, whether it's just stimulation from seeing a cat play the piano, or whether it's adult content. This process of just looking at lots of bits and bobs all the time on the brain and going into this meta world, which isn't out there, it isn't the flesh and blood world of proper socialization, is actually having an impact on rewiring the brain. It's fundamentally changing the way that our neurons fire and interconnect ideas, which are then putting people into these sort of bottom-of-the-well syndromes, the doldrums, if you will, for want of a better phrase, where they find it very difficult to engage out there like a normal social animal, like, as humans are evolutionarily supposed to be.
Yeah, and Jonathan Haidt has written a lot about this. Oh,
he's great, that's the psychologist.
But what he's pointed out is that this generation is getting more and more anxious. But again, it kind of comes back to schools. I mean, we know that the most successful schools ban phones altogether from being present on campuses. But actually, what you're seeing in lots of progressive schools, no doubt the kind of schools that Labour's woke new curriculum SAR will admire the most, what they're doing is they're bringing devices into the classrooms. So even within class, kids are sitting there on their iPads, they learn everything. And it is profoundly, profoundly dangerous because, in actual fact, real work, the kind of things that gives you long-term satisfaction, contentment, a sense of achievement, it's not quick, it's not instantaneous, it's not a flick of a hit here, I'm bored with this, flick it on there. No, it requires long, hard, determined work when nobody's watching. And when you've done that, when you've built something, then you have real satisfaction. And we have lost that completely as tech companies. And I think there is a role here, you wouldn't normally hear me saying this, for the state to step in and do more here.
I think so, yeah.
Tech companies have hacked, particularly the adolescent mind, and we need to step in and make sure that kids are spending no more than an hour a day on a screen.
Oh, they have these devices. You've had 6 hours of screen time today. You know, these sort of things that will alert you to your screen time. What we need to do is grab kids by the scruff of their neck, drag them out into the countryside, put their phones in a bottom of a, bucket and say, you're spending 8 hours, no phones, no anything, build a campfire, talk to each other, problem solve, have some fun, laugh, scuff your knees and grow up. Right. On that note, we're going to take a small break ourselves from technology, but you are supposed to be staying tuned to your screen because you still got 2 hours and 40 minutes of me and a whole day of brilliant programming coming up on Talk. After the break, though, we want you to engage your brain, use your laughing gear and get in touch with us. Use some of your social skills, why don't you, and add your voice to the conversation. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to be talking to Sam and I in the studio. That is charged at standard network rate. So basically, doesn't cost you any extra. They're not doing it. So why don't you exercise the old grey matter? It's going a bit funny. You don't even know what day of the week it is, do you? You're not sure what the date is. No, it's that weird period between Christmas and New Year and you've kind of disengaged. So why don't you kickstart the old thoughts crumpet up there and give it a squeeze and see what comes out. You can use that number to send us a WhatsApp message as well, 0344 499 1000, or indeed leave me a voice note on that platform. If you want to send a text message, the good old-fashioned SMS number is 87222. You have to write the word talk before your text. That way, it pings the masts here on top of Talk Towers and doesn't get lost in some other weird spacecraft out there. It doesn't get sucked in by an orb or a drone chasing an orb. We are on X at talkTV, and I'm back just after this.
What do you make of this Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage feud? Because it seems to me most people looking at it say it wasn't really necessary. Kemi Badenoch didn't need to do it. She didn't need to raise the problem. She didn't need to raise the issue that many, many more people who used to vote Conservative are now going to vote Reform.
When you speak to Reform people, they're like, thank you, Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah.
You've done us a huge favour. This story was going away. Yes, we had our surge in numbers. Yes, we'd overtaken you. And just with your tweet on Boxing Day, you just gave us another week of coverage. Thank you so much.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back, you scrumptious, gorgeous, lovely, patriotic, discerning things. It's so wonderful to have your company today. I'm with you until 1 o'clock. Let's rattle through some of your messages before we hit up the phone lines. Dave says, unfortunately, mental health is the new backache, and it doesn't pay to work when the benefit system is so generous. No wonder the country's finances are so bad. That's true. Do you know what? It's not a surprise. People don't really like to work if they don't have to. If they can get away with doing nothing and not earn money, they think, anyway, that that's a good idea and they're going to enjoy it more. The problem, of course, with the 21st century, with the abundance of rubbish on smartphones and box sets and, you know, on-demand content, is once upon a time, if you didn't work, you stared at the four walls of your house and started to go a bit doolally. Now you just go down wormholes online and go doolally-er. Do you know what I think we should do? That's right. If you don't seem to have any discernible big crippling injury, you've got to go to work or no benefits for you. It's very simple. You just have to get tough, really, don't you? Kevin says, a 22-year-old acquaintance of mine has worked for approximately 6 weeks in 2024 in total. That includes about 5 days helping his mum to clean at my house. And the reason he's been off ill with anxiety and depression, because his granddad died in 2023. But it doesn't stop him earning an extra crust in competing in low-level wrestling competitions around the area. This is the other thing. A lot of people now, when you ask young kids at school, seriously, ask 10-year-olds what they want to be when they grow up, they all say they want to be a YouTuber. It's not a job. I mean, it sort of is, I guess, if you manage to earn money from it, but it's not really a thing. And this is the problem. Humans, by and large, will sort of sit around and do nothing, given half the chance, and they'll think it's good for them. They'll think that's going to make them feel happy and content, but it always has the adverse effects. It's a bit like exercise, isn't it? You're like, oh, God, do I have to get the gym kit on? Do I have to go for a run? But guess what? When you've done it and the endorphins are, like, whirling around your body, you feel a lot better, you're skinnier, and you're less mad. Clay in Folkestone says, talking about young people who have mental health issues and being too ill to work, there will be the same young people who are moaning that they cannot afford to buy their own home. Do you know what, Clay? I think you're wrong on this. The people who are moaning that they can't afford to buy their own home are the ones going to work, like me, earning a really decent wage, giving half of it to the government so other people sit there and do nothing and then can't afford to buy their own home. We're the ones, my friend, with a, real sort of bone to chew over this one. Let's go to the phone lines now and speak to David, who's in South Wales. Hi, David.
Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
Yes, I'm 81 and I'm despair of the younger people of this country. They would rather be ill or claim to be ill than work. They don't believe in putting anything into the country. It's all a question of what they can get out of it. Benefits, anything like that. A wage is all right, but it can be offset with sick benefits. You don't have to go to work, go sick. The mental health issue is ridiculous because there's no way of measuring your mental health. It's only an opinion.
There's even people online on things like Twitter who actually sell their services of how to hack the sickness benefits form. You know, use this form of words, answer this question this way, because they know some idiot sitting the other side just has a checklist. And so if a certain word is said, it's a bit like how they mark exams these days. If a certain form of words is used, oh, tick, 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 therefore you get disability benefits. Like I said, I think that when it, you know, if it's bereavement, someone needs to have leave. If it's a psychosis or something that is a medicalised form of mental health, then OK, I understand you need treatment, you need constant care. Anything else, I don't think there should be sickness benefits. I just don't think there should. Because I think that, you know, the motivating factor of getting out of bed, going and mixing with society, pulling yourself together, traversing hurdles in life, is facing up to reality.
Well, the worst thing I ever did was retire.
Oh. You're bored, are you?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, no, I worked hard. I mean, I worked in a demanding job.
What did you used to do?
I was the troubleshooter in the Coal Wards Computer Centre in South Wales.
Ah.
And we never got a night's sleep for Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday because somebody trying to do something they shouldn't with the payroll. So, but, I mean, I liked it. I mean, if the machines broke down, I'd drive to Cannock and work through the night there, walk back the next day, and if the machine was still down, I'd do the same again. Often worked a 48-hour shift. But the thing is that these days, people don't do that.
Nobody wants struggle and strife anymore. And the thing is, you kind of need the light and shade in life to really appreciate the light. And I think that, you know, if everything is instant gratification, it actually makes people sad. Struggle, in some respects, is part of the edifying element of being a human, of existing. It's naturally woven into life. And I think we need more struggle.
Yeah, we do. I mean, life's got to be hard. I mean, I was lucky enough to be taken to have my education ruined by being taken to Kenya when I was 12.
Oh, lovely.
And that's what I said. But every time I mention it to somebody, they'd say, "Oh, the trauma."
Do you know, I used to live in. Lived and worked in Kenya for a year. Amazing place. But actually, I've always said that a lot of these hooligans going around on bicycles, nicking phones, the best thing they could do is be sent off to go and do proper gap years and go and, you know, dig a well up in Samburu and see how the real world actually is. David, thank you ever so much, my darling. It's always great to speak to you. Let's catch up as well with Christine in Surrey. Hi, Christine.
Hello, Alex.
Hello.
I want to talk about education.
Yes.
Well, the rot with education set in with Blair because for his education, just swap it with indoctrination. Because all of the technical colleges were turned into pseudo-universities. And these poor children, their minds are literally being poisoned with ideologies that are not in, they're just very radical. And since 2008, we now have these people coming out into society, into all our institutions with their Marxist ideas. We're meant to be nurturing the minds of our children.
Christine, you're right. I think that you're right, that it was sort of the Blairite government that laid the stepping stones for the sort of demented middle classes we now have in all of our various public-facing institutions who, frankly, have become a wrecking ball through common sense. And you're right as well, the Blairite government wanted everybody to go into further education to cover up, essentially, out-of-workness as we got rid of manufacturing. And it's all very well people talking about, well, actually, perhaps some people are better at doing skilled professions, manual jobs, blue-collar work, so on and so forth. We sort of prevented people from being able to do that, not just by stymieing manufacturing through a load of greenie legislation, but importing workforces which are much cheaper from abroad, so they're just not attractive to work in those professions anymore. Christine, thank you ever so much. I heard a little snicker from you earlier on, Sammy. You're scrolling, aren't you, in the corner there, you millennial? What are you reading? Share with the class. You know, this is how it goes.
Well, I was reading about the woke incorporated campaigners that are due to take it to Donald Trump in the next term, which is just a sign of the fights we've got ahead in 2025. It's coming up to the end of 2024, and if we thought this year was tough, I think next year is going to be an even tougher one, with the Starmer government really beginning to bed in.
Well, the gloves are going to be off, that's for sure. We're going to be kept busy this side of the political fence. Going to take a short break now, but when we come back, one story that's not going to be going anywhere is the constant flow of migrants crossing the Channel. We're catching up with Alex Phillips, chairman of the fantastic organisation Migration Watch, after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Well, this story I kind of receive with a degree of cautious optimism, let's say, which is the fact that the Home Office is spending 15 million on satellites, which will be able to track migrants attempting to cross the Channel from space. A Luton-based branch of Telespazio UK will be providing enhanced surveillance for the Joint Maritime Security Centre, which ensures the country can respond to threats to security, law and order and the marine environment. It's going to help the Home Office detect dark targets. Those are bits that don't sort of pop up necessarily on radar or anything else, for the Joint Maritime Security Centre, which ensures the country can respond to threats to security, law and order and the marine environment. Dark targets, what are they, you might say? Ships used by criminals to smuggle goods and tiny dinghies used by Channel migrants. Well, that sounds like a good idea. Let's start tracking these things as they cross the Channel. Problem is, I don't think they're hard to spot anyway, are they? And what are we going to do when we find them? Shove them on a lifeboat and bring them to shore to speed up the journey? Let's speak to Alex Phillips, chairman of Migration Watch UK. Alp, I am all for the government seemingly putting in place efforts to try and stop what is now the biggest international criminal activity industry on earth. It's bigger than nefarious drug smuggling. The international drugs trade is the trade in human beings. So I'm all for being able to track things like this. But unless we're prepared to get the people on the boats and say, I'm afraid you've broken the law, you're being sent somewhere, or you're going to be punished for having done this, what good is it going to do? It's a bit like saying, oh, look at all these criminals doing things, and they go, oh, but come in, you don't have to go to prison, you don't have to face any consequences.
Good morning, Alex. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you put your finger on it. It's not a case of tracking them and getting to find out where they are a bit earlier, a bit sooner. It's what happens afterwards. I mean, why do the EU, why does France let them in the first place? Why doesn't France actually pick them up and stop them from setting off from their shores? It's not going to make any difference to the numbers coming. In fact, I'd be pretty confident in suggesting that by this time next year, we will have seen as many, if not more, coming across the channel illegally. My feeling is that we'll be touching on 200,000 by this time next year, bearing in mind that 150,000 have arrived over the last 7 years already. I don't think that's going to change. The costs are going to go up. The backlog is going to continue and probably grow. The costs are going to increase, and sadly, more people are going to die.
Well, this is it. So people are dying. We've had 3 migrants die attempting to cross the channel after a boat filled with Sudanese was stormed by Syrians also trying to get out. Look, I understand if I was from Sudan, where they've got one of the most horrific wars, of course not being spoken about because it's not the right kind of perpetrator or not the right kind of victim, but what's going on over there is abominable. I think 1/3 of the entire population is displaced, 250,000 dead within a year. It's absolutely horrific. And if that's where I was, I'd be trying to get out. Of course I would. And so I have a lot of sympathy. Similarly with Syrians. I mean, if these are Syrians who are having to escape that country because they're likely to be persecuted based upon their religion or whatever, fine. But when you're then crossing the channel and paying a people trafficker, I'm afraid you have to be punished. If I were, for instance, you know, in India and I wanted to go to Pakistan or vice versa and tried to cross that border illegally, I don't think I'd survive it. Now, I'm not advocating anything of the sort to be used against people trying to illegally break into this country, but they must be treated as people doing something illegal, however tragic the backstory, because if we don't do that, more people die in the channel, and people traffickers who largely are connected to foreign terrorist organisations will be making bucket loads of money.
Alex, let's be frank. They're not coming from Sudan. They're not coming from Iran. They're not coming directly from Syria. They're coming from France. That is not a dangerous country. Why don't the French, why doesn't the EU actually deal with them rather than sort of wash their hands of them the moment they've set sail from their shores? That's what I find quite galling, really, that they are blaming Britain. And we are welcoming. We do put them up in comfortable accommodation. We do give them pocket money, and ultimately we allow them to stay. That's why they come, not because they're escaping persecution or danger, because they're not.
I wonder where we go with this in 2025, because it's quite clear our government aren't really prepared to grab the nettle and do anything different. And I think what we need is a radical approach to this problem. I wonder, actually, depending on what Donald Trump does, if that's going to give political cover to others in the West to start adopting a more radical approach. But the problem is we are sort of downflow of whatever the EU decides to do, unless we decide to make enemies in France. I mean, I think we should, frankly. I think all we need to do is turn a couple of boats back round to France, dump them back on French shores and go, we've had enough, we're not playing this game anymore. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
It won't happen. But I tell you what, were it the other way round, I guarantee that the French would do exactly that.
Oh, they would.
Pretty much in the way that Ireland has done with people crossing the border from the north into the Republic of Ireland. We won't. We don't have the guts. We don't have the courage backbone, and frankly, we don't particularly care, or at least our governments don't particularly care. They'd much rather put up with all the flack from people like you and me than actually face the truth and do something about something serious about stopping those who are crossing the channel, the young men who are crossing the channel to get to a better life. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, let's bring Sam into this before we go to break. My worry is it's not just young men crossing for want of a better life. There are plenty of people, like I said, these aren't just, you know, Derek sitting in his mother's basement, sending a few text messages to get a dinghy from Calais to Dover. Very often the people involved in this mass movement of human beings from all parts of the world have direct ties, if not themselves, terrorist organisations. And they might be making huge profits from this, but they will be also using these illicit routes to get their own cells into countries across the West.
Look, we have no idea who these people are that are turning up. We do know that it's a national security emergency. We know that at least a dozen individuals that have come across illegally on Channel boats have gone immediately onto MI5's terror watch list. That is placing an unreasonable strain on our security services who have to track these people, and it's placing us all at danger. And we cannot just keep putting our heads in the sands. We know that we've had terrorist atrocities that have occurred in the past from people that have smuggled themselves into this country illegally and/or come in and then breached visa conditions. And there will come a point where the British public simply say, enough is enough is enough. We've told you to deal with this. We couldn't have made ourselves any more clear. Now is the time for the actual action to end this. Not just spotting them on satellite so we can go and pick them up earlier. Frankly, we could stop doing everything we're doing on so-called border security. We'd actually have fewer migrants arriving in our shores rather than more, because all we're doing is going and picking them up.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Sam, Alp, thank you ever so much. Let's take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be discussing the South Korea plane crash. At least 177 killed after what was suspected to be a bird strike, but bigger questions are now being asked about what went on in that particular aviation incident, which follows a number of other aviation incidents that have happened around the world. We'll be talking about that after this.
But I think there is only one winner, and it is the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He's a liar, he's a farmer harmer, two-tier, free gear, never here. Let's be clear, Keir. He wins it.
That was
Plank, not only of the week, Matty, but plank
of the year.
Of the year.
Very well deserved.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there. Well, following what appears to be a really horrible incident in Kazakhstan, where it's been alleged that Russia may well have shot down an aeroplane thinking it was a Ukrainian drone, there was then a really horrific plane crash in South Korea with at least 177 killed after a suspected bird strike. The pilots reported a bird strike and declared Mayday before the jet went down. You may not be aware of this, but there have also been two other aviation incidents, one in Canada, with a much smaller plane involved there, and one in Norway with a Dutch plane. Again, both aircraft failing to have a safe landing after issues, it seems, with landing gear, which also seems to be what could have happened in South Korea. I am no expert in aviation, but I know someone who is, because he joins us now, is Alistair Rosenshine. Alistair, thank you ever so much. You're a former BA pilot as well, worth mentioning. What do you think has gone on in South Korea in this particularly horrific incident?
It's a really interesting accident, and one that's very puzzling not just to me, but to other aviation analysts. What is surprising is that a bird strike in one engine, and I'm pretty sure that is what happened, should not have been a major issue. Yes, you make a mayday, yes, you make an emergency landing, but you should be able to fly the aircraft perfectly safely with one engine. So why did they land with their gear up? Why did they not have the flaps deployed? We don't know. And also they landed halfway down the runway, which is another reason why the accident was quite so catastrophic. But these are questions which accident investigators are going to look into keenly. They're also going to look into the maintenance of the aircraft because, as I say, with the loss of one engine, you still have the ability to lower your flaps and your landing gear and perform a normal landing.
What do you think's gone on with this? Because, like I said, I doubt they're connected. I'm not that mad a conspiracy theorist, but we've seen issues with different flights with far less devastating outcomes in Canada and Norway. Again, landing gear failure, all of these things happening over the course of the last few days. There seems to be a sort of minor pandemic with issues with landing gear. Is this because, I don't know, maybe a lot of our aircraft stock are getting on a bit? Could there be anything that connects these incidents?
Not to my mind, no, not at all. The Boeing 737 is probably the most numerous type of aircraft flown as a civil airliner. I used to fly them back in the 1980s, flew them for 6 years, and they're a very successful aircraft. There have been a number of accidents over the years, but then there are thousands of these aircraft have been built, so it is likely you're going to have a few accidents amongst them. But there's nothing particular about this one. This was not the 737 MAX aircraft, of which there were two famous accidents recently, but that was a completely different type of accident, and this is not related to that at all. There are a number of hypotheses that analysts have about this, and one may be that the second engine was also shut down or failed, which would have resulted in a loss of hydraulics. And but it really is quite difficult to explain what happened here. But one thing we can be certain about, that just off the end of the runway, about 270 meters after the end of the runway, was a very large earth embankment with some instrument landing system antenna on it. Now, had that not have been there, the aircraft would have continued to slide across a small road and then into another field and gradually come to a halt, and it's unlikely it would have ended up with anything like as many casualties. So that will definitely come up in this accident report that will follow.
So one assumes then, if whenever you see horrific incidents like this, at least the silver lining is lessons are learned and new regulations are put in place, so the same incidents cannot happen again. So one might say that, OK, no more concrete barriers towards the end of runways in case someone slides off the end of a runway, if there's a landing gear failure or icy conditions. If the plane had lost hydraulics, would that therefore, I'd imagine, prevent the landing gear from being deployed?
No, they can still apply. They can still lower it manually,
right?
But not in a mayday situation where they're tremendous hurry. There's obviously something else has happened. They appear to possibly have lost electrical power as well later on in the approach, because the data that the aircraft transmits has apparently ceased to transmit 90 seconds before the aircraft touched down on the runway. One can speculate about this. But I think that in view of the fact they've already got the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, they should, in very short order, be able to pinpoint what happened here. And so I don't think there's much to be gained by speculating on this particular incident. But, that question of having that wall, that mound of earth at the end of the runway, I mean, that's unusual. I've flown all around the world to maybe 100, 150 airports, and I can't remember seeing any structure that was deliberately placed at the end of a runway. There are runways which end in a ravine or in the sea, or there's a mountain at the end of the runway. I mean, these things, the natural structures are there. There's not much you can do about it. But there is no need to actually put in a man-made structure that can cause a runway, an aircraft to overrun the runway, to then catastrophically destroy itself. And that was the case here. And that really is going to be a strong focus in this investigation.
No, I don't want to lead you up the garden path of speculation, but I will ask you before I let you go if there's any indication that there could be any sort of nefarious involvement, any deliberate act of sabotage.
I would put that down as extremely unlikely.
That is good to know. Very reassuring indeed. Alistair Rosenshine, thank you ever so much. Now, Sam, it's interesting, isn't it? When you see air accidents, because of the nature of when a plane comes down, it normally is quite catastrophic. If a plane crashes, the likelihood of survival is pretty low. But it is worth also pointing out that I don't know how many planes are flying around in the sky at any given moment, but it really is like a one in almost a million chance that this is likely to happen. It's very rare that we have issues with aviation.
Yeah, the truth is it's much, 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 much more dangerous for you to get into your car and drive down to your local supermarket than it is for you to get on board a Boeing 737 and fly halfway around the world. When it happens, these things are dramatic scenes, and we all want to know why. And I feel it the same. I get onto a plane and I put my seatbelt on, and even I have a sort of tinge of nerves as a very frequent flyer of, what happens if this plane, I don't know, falls out of the sky. But
that's why you order a big gin and tonic, Sam. It gets rid of that straight away.
Well, that has been my experience. Pass out by the time the plane is in the air. But look, no, planes are an incredibly safe thing. But what a bad year for South Korea. It's just kind of getting over the back of its major coup attempt led by its own president. And then it goes into ending the year with an awful, once-in-a-century plane crash.
We were sort of having a rather dark joke earlier, of course, because we were discussing this and discussing how back of the aircraft, because there were a couple of survivors on this who were both staff members, but they were sitting right at the back of the plane. And if you're going to bear anything in mind, that is the safest place to be in an aircraft, near the toilet, near the drinks trolley, and also the safest.
It's also the noisiest, but there we are. Maybe.
Yeah, but maybe that just lulls you to sleep. It drowns out the noise of babies crying and things like that. So it's actually... But we were joking, weren't we, in a dark way. It's funny, they sit all the rich people up at the front. But no, you're right, actually. It has been a very difficult year for South Korea. And we're still looking for answers as well of what went on in Kazakhstan. Russia, of course, saying, well, probably nothing to do with us. And it makes you remember all of the other sort of various Singaporean airlines, the sort of MH planes. Yeah. We've still had very few answers over the one that completely disappeared. And what happened in Kazakhstan brings back to memory what happened with that plane that was shot down. I think it's likely the Kazakh flight probably was as well, but was shut down. That was sort of over eastern Ukraine all those years ago before the Russian invasion.
Yeah, there's a few things that really are the dangerous points in flying an aircraft. One is takeoff, one is landing, the other is flying anywhere near Vladimir Putin. That man shoots first and asks questions later. And, of course, there are 72 Dutch passengers that were killed in that original flight over Ukraine. That the Russian authorities have been, the individuals involved in leading that have been indicted by various international panels and by Dutch prosecutors themselves. They've not faced any justice. And, of course, it's worth saying that they, like tens of thousands, in fact now hundreds of thousands of others, have lost their lives at the hands of Vladimir Putin and his cronies, and they'll have all just spent Christmas without their loved ones. it's probably worth a moment to remember just how awful that man is who's attempted to spread war across our continent.
Well, this is it. Getting from A to B now, unless you're flying to America and you've just got, you know, the deep between you and your destination, getting anywhere now from Europe going east involves flying over some pretty tasty parts of the world. I remember flying somewhere and the plane was sort of diverted round. You know, they very rarely now fly over places like Iran and Iraq and Syria, which means if you're trying to go to various parts of Middle East, Africa, India, you're kind of having to do a bit of a loop around.
Yes.
When was your last big flight?
Only to Malta in the summer.
I like Malta. Nice
ages.
part of the... Oh, poor you. I'm flying off on Thursday. Good for me. Right, going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because when I come back, we're going to be joined by the one and only Baroness Claire Fox. I'm back just after this.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that bind.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock today. Same tomorrow, same on Wednesday indeed. So you can book that in your diary, set a little automatic notification on your phone to ping you that it's Phillips o'clock over the next 3 days. And thank you so much for your company. I've thoroughly enjoyed the first hour. Someone's just sent a message here going, I can see your building from my apartment. Have you got a telescope? Can you see me? If so, hi. Hiya. All right, yeah. You should be, I'm making it easy for you with the big bandaged claw. If you're a bit like Fraser Crane and his telescope. You might not understand that reference. Do you understand that reference?
No.
Is that okay? You're too young for Fraser, aren't you?
I'm afraid so.
That's a shame. It was the best programme ever made on television. Right, let's now talk about things that have come across the pond and blessed Britain with its presence. Elon Musk says very few people are going to be doing that from America, especially under the Labour government. The tech tycoon blames the current administration for putting off wealth creators in remarks that will come as a blow to the Prime Minister. I don't think it will come as a blow to Sir Keir Starmer. I don't think Sir Keir Starmer cares. That's half the blimmin' problem. He made the comments in response to a letter from Scottish politicians who want Tesla, of course Mr Musk's electric car firm, to open a new gigafactory there. And he said very few companies will be willing to invest in the UK with the current administration. Now, this is after, of course, that they decided not to invite him to their big cyber tech future of AI, whatever it was. It's some big sort of innovation summit. Because he had, slagged them off, really, on social media, to put it mildly. And, I mean, this is petty, Sam. This, at the end of the day, this isn't just the richest man in the world, now quickly becoming one of the most powerful men in the world, not just because of his connections to Trump and the incoming administration in America, but he controls all the satellites in space, basically. I kind of think you just don't want to mess with him. I don't think he's a malign character. I don't think he's nefarious. I think he does want to engage. But shutting him out, I mean, it might be the right of a government to say, we don't like your politics and your attitude, so we won't do business with you. But grow up.
Well, look, just compare and contrast the way that this Labour government is dealing with Elon Musk, a man that's going to be a key figure in our closest allies' administration, that has been a phenomenally successful businessman, and by the way, a green businessman, and has a deep and natural love for this country and could invest in a massive way, which is why these Scottish politicians wrote to him in the first place. Compare and contrast the way that our government deals with him to the way they deal with President Xi of China.
I've written the word China on my piece of paper and underlined it 5 times.
A murderous, dictatorial megalomaniac who has locked over 1 million Muslims in concentration camps, who has spied each and every day on us, and who is going around his near neighbourhood undermining our interests in each and every way. And to say you don't agree with Elon Musk on politics, this is a guy that believes in a one-party state based on an ethno-nationalism of the likes of which would make anybody in Western politics blush. And how does our government deal with him? Well, they roll out the red carpet.
Yeah, please, sir, can we have some more wind turbines and solar panels? Yeah, but there was that report out just the other week about how many green jobs would be created by the Green Revolution, which they've told us, of course, for a decade now. All the jobs that we're going to create. Yeah, in China. And jobs, I think, is putting it lightly, because I'd imagine that a lot of the wimwoms we buy are coming straight out of concentration camps.
Yeah, and our government can't keep from sending senior government ministers, actually sending David Lammy over to them might be a punishment. But it can't keep but rolling over. It won't call them a threat. It won't match any of the Labour Party's own language from when they were in opposition towards China. We have a government that is prostrated itself at the feet of this dictatorial regime. And then it turns around to a businessman who they happen to disagree with over a couple of tweets. And it says, no, we're not interested.
And this is the party. You look back through their social media footprint and it's like pretty strong stuff you said there, Mr Streeting. Oh, maybe shouldn't have used that word, Orange. It does smack of ridiculous, petty hypocrisy. Before we cross to Baroness Claire Fox, let's just chew this one over and then we'll sort of sweep back through the lot of it with the wonderful Baroness, which is that Labour would lose 200 seats and almost a third to Reform if an election was held today. That's according to the polls. Farage would make sweeping gains, taking an extra 67 seats from Labour. That would bring their tally to 72 seats. The mega poll would put Reform as the third biggest party in the Commons and send shockwaves through Westminster. It would also see a number of cabinet ministers being unseated, including Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband, Yvette Cooper. Wes Streeting would lose his seats. Islamists, however. People must be hearing that information going, go on, get in there. What I think is just so ridiculous about this is, as someone who used to be, kind of Nigel's right-hander in UKIP, then, of course, as the Brexit Party, I could have told people ages ago, well, pollsters are going on about, splitting the vote on the right, the Conservative Party. I've been saying for ages, no. You look at UKIP. A third of the vote came from the Conservatives, a third came from Labour, and a third from people who never voted before. I'm pretty sure that the appeal goes to exactly the same demographics. Plus, I think there are even more people now having their heads turned by the concept of Reform. Now they've got a foothold in Parliament. And you just look at the 98 second places that Reform got. The vast majority were in Labour heartlands, particularly the working class heartlands. This isn't a surprise, is it?
Well, Alex, I'm sorry to say this, but I couldn't disagree with you any
How dare you
more.
get out of my studio. First you try and infect me when you're here last time. Now you're having the audacity to disagree.
I'm going to take you on. Look, I looked at that poll, and the most frustrating thing about it was that Keir Starmer would lose all of these seats. He would be electorally humiliated. And yet the undeniable mathematics of the House of Commons is that a coalition of chaos between Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Greens, you wouldn't even need to touch the Islamists, would be able to, Plaid Cymru, would be able to command a majority of the House of Commons. And we would be left with a government even more left-wing than the one that we've got at the minute. If, however, under some kind of arrangement or some kind of narrowing of the political support, one of, and I put it like this, one of Reform or Conservatives more efficiently collected their votes, you would be looking at the biggest right-wing majority in
one could argue, if you're
history.
talking about Labour would only win with a coalition on their side, the same could be said on the right. There could be a coalition on the right, which would probably batter the left into,
But crucially and critically, it would have to occur prior to an election. And I think it's becoming unarguable.
I always say this about Brexit, What enabled Leave to win? I remember this, right, on that campaign when there was leave.eu and Vote Leave, and they spent more time slinging mud at each other than campaigning. And I can remember thinking, this is an absolute disaster. This is ridiculous. Look how organised they are on the Remain side. Look at all these big shiny names they're rolling out, when instead you just had sort of Dominic Cummings and Aaron Bounce exchanging blows and calling each other rude names. And yet, what I think happened there is, on one side, the Vote Leave sort of supporters would have been more I like the Tory party, I like what Michael Gove's saying about sovereignty. Oh, Jacob Rees-Mogg on trade, isn't he good? Then on the other side, I'll never vote Tory, but I like that Farage, yeah, it's all about immigration. And two groups of people who, by and large, would not see eye to eye on anything, both voted in the same direction.
I think this analysis misses one critical figure out of it, which was Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson then, as he did later in 2019, was uniquely, perhaps, but maybe replicably, able to unite those two factions and to drive through the realignment that's going through in politics, in which the Conservative Party or right-wing parties around the world are changing to become more working class, to become more provincial. And what Boris was able to do is to bring that coalition together. He did it in 2016 in the referendum. He did it in 2019. And that's why I don't think that old analysis of there are some seats that the Conservatives can never win and there are some seats that only Reform can win necessarily holds up. I think there's a bit of that in there, and I certainly think under the current sort of face and shape and brand of the Conservative Party, there is more of that in there.
Maybe the Conservative Party should be stressing a bit more about the Lib Dems taking their seats. I don't know. Let's speak to Baroness Claire Fox, now Independence peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. Claire, always wonderful to have you on the programme. Early Happy New Year, because I don't know if I'll get to speak to you beforehand, and a belated Merry Christmas to you. Let's start off with the Elon Musk story, saying very few people are willing to invest in Britain under a Labour government. I mean, one could argue, however, that he is really trying to sort of stick his oar into what essentially is a completely different country, and perhaps he should just stick with doing business rather than meddling in our politics.
Well, to be fair, he was approached by Ash Regan, the Scottish politician, asking him to come and set up a Tesla factory in Scotland, and his response was, well, I'm not sure that anyone's going to invest while you've got the current Labour Party in charge, right? I thought it was interesting, Alex, because you said, well, I don't suppose Keir Starmer will care. But actually, if you think about it, one of the things which the Labour government keeps telling us is very important, and one of the big summits they organised was the investment summit. They keep saying they're going for growth. So it seems to me that they need to stop and consider why it is that somebody like Elon Musk would say it's not profitable, it's not in the present circumstances a place we would invest. And I do think that the rhetoric around growth from the Labour government saying that we need to grow the economy is shown to be paper thin, because actually they are setting in place a range of policies which are going to alienate and put off anyone who thinks that this is somewhere worth taking a risk and investing in. That's very worrying as far as I'm concerned. Forget the Elon Musk factor in a way. It's more, will it alienate people like Elon Musk everywhere else? Because think of things that they've done. They've made it more expensive to employ people in this country. They're bringing in a workers' rights bill, and I'm all for workers' rights, but actually this particular bill is likely to have the impact of over-regulating the way that employers are going to employ people and make it almost bureaucratically impossible to have any kind of way of dealing with people who they employ. So you've got all these real challenges. It's just not hospitable to growth at the moment.
It's not hospitable, but also I think with Elon Musk it comes down to, yes, there's the economics of it. According to Jeremy Hunt, former Chancellor, he was saying that Britain was without doubt on Musk's map in terms of building overseas production plants, and no longer are we. I think there's also the fact that Elon Musk just doesn't particularly like the way things are going when it comes to the social management of this country either. What are your thoughts on the idea that it's the Labour Party, really, who should be looking over their shoulders at what Reform are up to?
Oh, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that this unsavoury spat between Kemi Badenoch in relation to the ticking membership of Reform has taken away from a very important point here, which is there is a dynamic around Reform which, no disrespect to Nigel Farage or Richard Tice, has almost got very little to do with them. I think that what's happened is that the British public, millions and millions of people, now feel that the mainstream parties are just not fit for purpose. And they are looking to give them both a bloody nose, looking for an alternative. It's part of a populist surge that we've seen throughout Europe, that we're seeing, in some ways, was represented by Trump, Trump's decisive win against Kamala Harris. And if you can see the Labour Party are more in the Kamala Harris vein of politics, they need to really be aware of the fact that for millions of we call them in a caricatured way red wall Brexiteers, but ordinary working people, to use their language, who genuinely thought, well, we're not going to vote for the Tories again, maybe give Labour a chance at the last election, and have been horrified by what's unfurled subsequently. The chippiness of the Labour government at the present time, their attacks on the working farmers, family farms, their attacks on pensioners, on anyone who has the temerity to want to send their kids to a private school and save up very hard to do so. All of it's daily, there is some sort of example of them really kind of exhibiting an unpleasant attempt at reshaping the UK. That's really, really, really alienated many people. And we shouldn't forget, and we'll be reminded very quickly, of the Southport riots. We'll be reminded when that court case happens. But the Southport-related riots that happened, which were extremely unpleasant to witness, and, you did feel as though a civil disorder was very frightening for many people. And there were elements of that which were unsavoury, and we did see some explicit racism and so on. But the government's response was to be explicitly labelling many people's concerns as far right, and we know indicated an absolutely illiberal, frighteningly draconian attempt at clamping down by putting people in prison for what they said. And I think that, therefore, each and every month that they've been in power, people have suddenly went, oh, my God, the Labour Party, I can't possibly vote for them again. And so it's the Labour Party and the disillusion with the Labour Party, a long-standing disillusion now with the Tories who imploded in their latter years, which means that people are just saying we need something different, and Reform are there, and the dynamics with them.
It's staggering, isn't it? I mean, the Labour Party seem to completely alienate the classes with wealth. They think farmers are wealthy. They think people who send their kids to private school are wealthy. But at the same time, they're the most sort of classist when it comes to beating down on anyone below them. They only like one sort of subset of society, which is all the people who I think live in a bubble, have no concept of the real world, have probably never put on a pair of wellies unless it's to go to Glastonbury, and have never been to a Wetherspoons either. And so all of these people are looking for somewhere to find a home. I want to ask you about Bridget Phillipson's plans to make the national curriculum more diverse. I mean, I think this is not just ghoulish, but it's going to have long-term ramifications, because she is going to push this through. She's going to make it law, so even academies can't remove themselves from the onerous curriculum. But it does, when you're talking about the education of children, lessons learned at school last for life.
The main problem with Bridget Phillipson is that she thinks that the curriculum as such, and what she means by that is the traditional canon, because actually, as it happens, there's a huge range of equality, diversity and inclusion policies already in the curriculum. But what she's having a go at, she's saying we need to ensure that the present curriculum is brought bang up to date, and so that we can reflect the diversity of the contemporary society we live in. I mean, talk about tone deaf, but actually a real act of cultural vandalism, because the best that's known and thought, the canon of the great literature, a sense of history where we really understand the country and the continent that we're from, and so that people who live in this country can really get to grips with where we stand in relation to history. The best that's known and thought does not need to be updated. It's the best that's known and thought. The idea of sweeping in with some attempt at modernising it, making it current. I mean, what does representative mean? I mean, are they going to say that unless we have, in a tick box way, history that reflects everybody sitting in a classroom? And we know already, we can tell already where we're going to go with this, and it's going to lead to increased decolonisation of the curriculum. And that basically means an alternative history, very often a made up a version of historical reality, of historical fact, an attack on history as being colonising, racist, dangerous, and so on. And so we've got to modernise it by talking about only the things which are considered politically today to be okay, and to pass some diversity test. All of this is very dangerous. By the way, it will also be very censorious, because what it will mean in the classroom and for teachers is that they cannot give any kind of nuance or depth or any kind of discussion, because I'll bet you anything, if you don't stick with this new national curriculum, which, as you point out, is going to be imposed with no opt-outs whatsoever. So it's diversity, but not when it comes to a diversity of opinion or a diversity of what is taught in the classroom. Now, it's a very scary prospect, let me tell you.
I think it's really scary. I think more people, more right-minded people, are just going to want to homeschool their kids. Before I let you go, Claire, we've gone really soft, haven't we? When I read this headline, I was just like, it's so enraging that council staff have been allowed to work from other countries. They've been allowed to work from abroad more than 2,000 times since the pandemic. This is people who, look, I get during the pandemic, when everyone was forced to work from home, it didn't really matter, therefore, if you had an internet connection, whether your home was in Lanzarote, if your home was in Lancashire. But if you're working for a local authority, now the pandemic's over, A, you should be going into the office, and B, you probably should be in the same region at the very least, even if you can't be bothered going into the office. The idea that people are there looking after bin collections in Barnsley and they happen to be sitting on a beach in Ibiza, I think is disgusting. It shows how soft we've become.
Well, it shows how soft we've become, but it indicates something else, doesn't it? I mean, it's a very serious cultural hangover of what the damage lockdown did. I mean, it created an atmosphere in which going to work became the minority sport, and they gave it the okay. You know, they basically said it's possible to do your job from somewhere else. It also indicates that all the talk that Labour government have about building communities is a load of guff, right? Because the way that you build communities is that you have people who work in local communities for local authorities who are committed to those communities, which might mean that you live in the area and go into work in the area and walk past the odd worker from the area on your way in. I mean, I know people who work for the local authorities who work in with the elderly and dementia care, who don't see the elderly or anyone with dementia. I mean, they're all doing it via pieces of paper on a computer. That's not the same as walking into the care home or talking to people who are carers of people who've got dementia and so on. You need to leave the house. But I think it also indicates another thing, which I heard you discussing earlier in the programme, which is an over-medicalisation of every aspect of life. Because if you challenge many people about why they need to go to work, why they need to get on the bus, get on the train, get on the tube to go into work, they'll say it's very bad for my mental well-being. I mean, you know, I don't like to mix with people. I feel myself that my mental health will suffer if I go into a toxic work environment, etc., etc. And people now interpret everything through this prism of ill health and threaten that if they are forced to do what is, you know, a job, you know, 5-6 days a week, I mean, traditionally 9 to 5, maybe longer or whatever, but that somehow that is going to damage you. And I think that we have lost respect for work.
Yeah.
Work is actually a very important part of what brings society together, that we commit to working hard and making things happen. We started off talking about Elon Musk and investment and so on. We're not going to have economic growth in this country if people who work in this country think you don't have to do any work.
Elon Musk, the
in
billionaire,
order to build a new society.
Elon Musk, the billionaire, who famously still sleeps on the floor of his office and works sort of 16-hour days every single day of the week because he really cares about what he does. He could teach a lesson or two to some of these sort of mentally ill people in Barbados or wherever they're doing. Baroness Claire Fox, it's so good catching up with you. I love Claire Fox. She's one of my favourite humans on earth. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, there have apparently been a load of EasyJet flights being cancelled at Gatwick due to thick fog. I mean, yesterday, you could barely see anything. You could see in front of you, but the clouds cover. You looked up and it was like the sky was basically on top of your roof. What is going on now and how is this going to impact on people who want to get out while they still can? We'll be catching up with Lisa Mino, travel editor of The Sun, after this.
Birth rate has been falling, particularly amongst young people. Official figures released before Christmas now show economic inactivity remains at near record of 9.3 million people.
The benefits bill, what is it going to sort to? I think it's $1 billion by the end of the decade or something.
But I mean, at the same time, we go to the shops and they're absolutely rammed full of people, right? Yeah. People are buying everything up. You know, you can't buy certain things because they've been sold out for months and months and months. So a lot of these people are living reasonably well. How about this for a proposition? Maybe some of them are not working, but are working on the black economy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now it's time for a quick travel update. We're joined by Lisa Minnow, travel editor of The Sun. Hi, Lisa. How are you doing? Did you have a good Christmas?
Lovely Christmas.
Oh, good.
Unlike a lot of poor travellers, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, tell us what's gone on here, because there seem to be a few issues going on at Gatwick Airport due to thick fog.
That's right. They've had a pretty miserable weekend at Gatwick Airport. With the thick fog, you get the National Air Traffic Control basically saying we can't have as many aircraft in the air or on the ground in the airport. So that's led to severe delays and cancellations throughout the weekend. This morning alone, we had 27 cancellations already. A lot of those were done in advance, though, because they're just trying to basically spread out the number of flights at this really busy time of year. But those 27 flights today, that's still 5,000 passengers that are not going where they intend to go today.
Is this going to have knock-on reverberations? Is this something that they can get on top? Because, of course, if your flight is cancelled, you can get on another flight, and if those flights at this busy time of year are fully booked, what happens? Is this going to have reverberations for quite a period of time?
It's going to have an impact for at least the next couple of days, yes. I mean, because people are going to have to try to find alternative flights, as you say, at a really difficult time of year with lots of people travelling. So it is going to have an impact. But hopefully the fog has now started to ease and the delays are starting to ease. But there are still significant number of flights delayed throughout the day at Gatwick. So I would definitely say anyone who's planning on flying out of Gatwick today, they must make sure that they check with their airline before they set off at the airport, because there are still significant delays.
Yeah, I'm flying out of Gatwick EasyJet on Thursday, so fingers crossed it all gets sorted by then. But anyone who has been unable to get a flight, who it's been delayed by more than 2 hours, you may well be entitled to some form of compensation. If it's longer, surely you should be getting some accommodation.
There is no compensation, I'm afraid.
Oh, really?
All that happens is that obviously, because it's not the airline's fault that there's fog. So unfortunately, there is no compensation. It has to be the airline's fault. So maybe something going wrong with an aircraft before you get compensation. But they do have a duty of care to look after you. So they have a duty of care if you're delayed, to make sure that they've given you food and drink vouchers, perhaps a way to perhaps communicate. And also, if you're delayed overnight, they should be providing you with hotel accommodation. If they don't, get it yourself. Make sure you keep every receipt and keep all of those expenses reasonable. Don't go start buying champagne. That's not going to help you. And if your flight's cancelled, your airline does have a duty of care to get you to your destination as quickly as possible, even if that's with a different airline. Again, they might not be the ones that are going to be doing that booking, but you can book that again yourself with a credit card. I would say the credit card definitely. Keep all your receipts and claim it back from your airline. The one thing I never ask people to do is to say to the airline, OK, I'll take the refund, because the minute you take the refund, then they have no duty of care to you whatsoever. It's all done and dusted, and it's then just down to you. So make sure that you do check your actual rights before you head off.
Lisa, it's always great catching up with you, and even though the new, whenever we have cause to talk, it's never good news, is it? It's never, Lisa, how brilliant are the roads? How on time are all of the trains? All the flights are taking off, no cancellations anywhere, no strikes. Air traffic control really on it this year, aren't they? But every time we do catch up, it is still somehow a pleasure. Lisa, thank you ever so much, travel editor of The Sun there. Right, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Bridget Phillipson and her plans to diversify the national curriculum. She's turned around and said that she claims middle-class families support her. I doubt it. We're back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there. Welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock. You know what that means, Sam? We've passed the halfway mark.
There we go.
An hour and 35 minutes almost of live broadcasting under our belts.
It does go by when you're having fun.
It does. You didn't say that very convincingly. You're like, it's how strange. We're having fun. Yes. Yeah, the upwards inflection, which I hate that millennials do, which it indicates uncertainty. You know, I was reading somewhere the other day that, listening to, I don't know, I sort of am constantly tapped into something interesting and intelligent. I was trying to expand my repertoire of information. And it was someone talking about how to be a good leader, how to be convincing, how to do well in business, how to gain respect. And the one main thing they said is, don't do an upwards inflection at the end of your voice. If you finish your sentence like this, people just don't have confidence in you. They don't...
It sounds like you're asking a question. In French, that's how you do it. You raise your inflection at the end, and that means you're
They also do this a lot in both. We've got the downwards facing mouth. It is very French.
It would have been rude for us to end the year without unjustified, unprompted attack on our French.
I love the French. I adore the French. Yeah. I speak fluent French. Yeah, you go, see. And I love them. I think they're brilliant. They're just... One thing I like about France compared to this country, and this is going to segue beautifully into our next topic, actually, is by and large, although it probably is changing with wokery invading there as well, but they're unabashedly proud of their country. They love their food. They think it's the best on earth, because it is. They love their literature, their art. They think that French culture, they don't mind talking about it and celebrating it. I've never come across a French person who goes, oh, all the terrible things we did in North Africa. Oh, well, the colonialism of West Africa. They don't seem to care. They don't seem to do that. Whereas we're like, self-flagellate all the time. Aren't we evil? The empire was dreadful. The French are just like, buff.
I bet there's not 10,000 DEI officers in France.
Also, it'd be quite hard to wokeify a language that's split into sort of feminine and masculine anyway.
That's a very good
Although
point.
Apparently someone's been trying. Again, something ridiculous I was listening to the other day. Right, let's speak to Nick Hillman, Director of the Higher Education Policy Institute and former advisor to David Willits when he was university's minister. Let's start off with this rather audacious claim from the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, that middle-class families support Labour's VAT raid on school fees because, according to her, she says that, the costs of private schools have gone up so much, the average middle-class person can't afford it, and they'd rather the people who can't afford it be taxed, and that money's channelled back into state education. Do you think she's got a point, Nick?
Well, good morning. And ever since I was invited onto your programme, I've been searching for the hard evidence to back up what she said. And I must say, I'm struggling to find it. I mean, I do understand the government's argument that this will raise more money for state school provision, and I have a child in a state school and I have another child in an independent school. But will that money really flow through? And also, how many families will remove their children from the independent sector and put them into state schools, raising the costs of state schools? There's a lot of argument over that, and no one really knows. But no one is absolutely certain if this policy will raise anything like the money the government is currently claiming that it will.
I mean, also, is it not the case that very often where sort of private schools might have stuff, hockey pitches, tennis courts, swimming pools, that they're often minded to lend those out to the local community?
Yes, I mean, it's very different at different schools. Some schools do a lot more of that than others. But the worry about the new policy is that could be the first thing that gives when the costs rise for independent schools. Because lending out your facilities is not... It's not completely free. You still have to have people there opening up the facilities, looking after them, cleaning them after they've been used, all those sorts of things. And a lot of independent schools are saying those are the sorts of things where they might now look to save money and that they might now stop. And we don't really know if that's sort of raising a red flag or will actually happen, but it's obviously a real concern for many people. Bridget Phillipson herself, I think, was found to have been playing hockey, wasn't she, on some private school facilities at one point, which shows how commonly used they really are.
I want to ask you something else, which isn't on my little list in front of me, but it's popped into my head because it ended up being a conversation in my kitchen a couple of nights ago. I had my American friend come and join me for dinner of my parents who were here having a belated Christmas with me. And we're standing in the kitchen yakking, and she said, oh, tell me about UK high schools. So my dad starts talking about high schools in his day, and we had his perspective from his generation. Then I was talking about in my day, and somehow this sort of all circled back round to a conversation about grammar schools, because I went to a grammar school. And I feel forever blessed that I did. When I did pop home to see my parents before Christmas on their turf, I found my old school yearbook. So I was flicking through it. It's quite funny. And on the back, it had everyone's names and contact details and the university they went to. And something hit me straight between the eyes when I looked at the list of everybody from my state school who happened to pass an 11+, was that almost all of them went to universities, and almost all of them went to extremely good universities, Russell Group or leading educators in the field, and about 10% went to Oxbridge, and that's a state school. And I just think, bring back grammar schools. I think they were brilliant for social mobility. My father was a lorry driver, albeit with a massive brain, but I just think it was one of the best ways of being able to get people who are academically minded into a pathway to really succeed in life and become our future leaders, whereas what we see now, essentially, is a domination of the moneyed and middle classes in professions such as law, even in the creative industries, which used to be the sort of emancipation of the middle working classes to express themselves. And it's almost like this debate's gone now. It's like people have gone, oh, it's settled. We don't like grammar schools. They're not fair. Where do you stand on it?
Well, it's gone in some parts of the country. It hasn't gone in the part of the country I'm talking to you from, because I live in Buckinghamshire, when every child pretty much still takes the 11+. And then some of them go off to grammar schools, and some of them go off to, they're not really called secondary modern schools anymore, but they are secondary modern schools. And in fact, sometimes those schools are very challenging schools. And that's why around here, going back to a previous conversation, people using private schools are often people whose children have not got through the 11+, and they don't want to use the schools the state are pushing them towards. My organisation, the Higher Education Policy Institute, we've published lots of reports on grammar schools. We published one, for example, that shows a very high proportion of BAME, Black, Asian and minority ethnic students who get to the very top universities, you know, places like Oxbridge, have indeed been educated in grammar schools and really thrived there. We've also published a report that shows, while that is true, people who live in grammar schools areas but don't pass the 11+ often do much less well in terms of social mobility. So it really does separate the sheep from the goats, and sometimes perhaps that's fair for the reasons you say, and sometimes it doesn't work against people because they have a bad day, the day they take their 11+. Or my own daughter didn't get through the 11+. She was on very strong epilepsy medicine at the time, and that affected her. And so it is a quite rough justice, but it does work out for some people very well, particularly, as I say, BAME families, actually, Black, minority, Asian ethnic families who have really benefited in very significant ways, actually, from our grammar school system, certainly here in Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got skin in the game. Like I said, I'm a Gloucester girl. We still have 4 state grammar schools in Gloucester, all single-sex schools as well, which I think is quite good. I went to the boys' school for sixth form, though. Had some fun, didn't I? But I really think it's a debate that needs to be brought back to the table. And again, it's some sort of sample size of me and the people I went to school with, but it certainly benefited my life. Another story here. Apparently, children are reading less and less than ever before, which I don't think should surprise anybody. But apparently, only 1 in 3 people aged 8 to 18 say they enjoy reading in their free time. Now, a lot of people would argue that they might not pick up a novel anymore. They might not be reading Of Mice and Men because it's too problematic. But they will be scrolling through phones. They're reading things online. But it's not really the same, is it? I mean, there is something about... I was read to every night as a child, and I was again listening to something the other day, and it was saying that actually parents who read to their children, or children who are read to even from being a baby, I think it was on the Today programme actually, have far better chances in life full stop than those who don't.
Yes, and it's also probably a big part of the reason why boys do less well than girls in the education system, because typically girls do a bit more reading than boys. And it is a real struggle, isn't it, for all of us who are parents, trying to find the book that is as exciting to a young person as the screen sitting next to them. And that's the challenge. And I think we've all got to cast our net wider. I've struggled for years to try to get my 12-year-old daughter to read children's books. She just wasn't interested. And then when Boris Johnson's biography came through my door from Amazon, she picked it up and she's read every single page of it. So all 700 pages. So I suddenly realised maybe I'd been trying to get her to read the wrong sort of books, and she's now determined she's going to do politics at A-level, for example, as a result of that. So I think we do need to really take children into bookshops, show them the variety of books there, not always push them towards these children's books written by the latest celebrity, which will engage some children, but not all children. And we might even want to push them back towards some of those classics of children's literature, which, you know, we all read when we were growing up.
Yeah, but not the Dickens. Keep the Dickens. I've never got along with him, I must admit. Nick Hillman, thank you ever so much. Sam, are you a reader? Were you a reader? Are you a reader? An ex-reader? A future reader? A present reader?
Both, and I rather like Charles Dickens, actually. Do you not like him at all?
No, I just find him a bit hammy and...
Hammy?
Yeah.
I don't know what that word means.
It's a bit sort of, what's a better word for it? You see, if I've been reading more recently, I'd have that better word, but a bit sort of... I don't know, two-dimensional. I think he's funny.
I think he might be...
The characteristics and the sort of cartoonish.
Yes.
It's just, I'm not saying he's bad. I think he's a very important part of our literary canon, but he's never appealed to me.
I think it might be boy books.
I think it's more boy books. I don't like him. I always get the impression that Charles Dickens was a bit of a... I don't know, I just don't like him. I think he comes through on paper, and I think he's a bit horrible. I don't know. But there is a problem here. And I think actually, you know, we talk about trying to get children to read more, adults as well. I think most people listening to this, when's the last time you picked up a book? When's the last time you got a novel and sort of did that thing? I don't like people who are precious. You're precious about books, aren't you?
I'm not precious. How do you mean precious?
Because the first thing I do when I get a book is...
I don't split the spine. No,
that's the first thing I do.
No,
and I don't use bookmarks. I fold down a page. I quite like a dog-eared, tattered book. It's been loved. It's been used. It's sort of had, like...
Spoiled.
Yeah, spoiled rotten.
No, spoiled in the worst sense of the word. No, I do read, but I don't like paperbacks, but often the best books are paperbacks, but then you kind of want them to look there.
Everyone thought Kindles were going to be a thing, didn't they? Oh, the e-readers are here, and I got a Kindle, and about a year later I was just like, nah, books.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's the satisfaction of being able to flick through every single page and then put it with its spine intact.
It was handy, you know, because I went to live abroad for months and months on end, so it was handy having a Kindle that I could load a load of books onto, so I didn't have to pack 12 into my suitcase.
Well, with all your holidays, you needed it.
I worked abroad, they weren't holidays, but I kind of keep saying to myself, I went through a period where I'd got back into reading, and it takes one book that you don't really enjoy,
and you
kind of, you get stuck in it. That's what I'm on. I've got one of those at the moment. It's actually a book about bookbinding, ironically.
I can't possibly imagine why that's not a...
No, it's a fiction book, and it's all about weird, witchy stuff, and it's not a bad book. But I don't know why it feels like a chore. There's something about the writing, it just feels like a chore.
Bad writing.
And I think it's very well written. I don't know what it is about this book, but it's sort of like when you start watching a documentary or a series or something like that, and it's 10 episodes long, you get to the 4th episode and you're kind of running out of enthusiasm for it, but you then feel like you've got to finish it.
You don't want to give up.
And then you just...
No.
Yeah. And I've got that. I'm bound by my book at the moment. I'm bound by my book on books binding things at the moment. And I need emancipation. What did you read when you were a kid?
Oh, I read everything. I really liked C.S. Lewis, all the Narnia things. But I was very much that Harry Potter generation.
You look like Harry Potter, actually.
Oh, goodness me, thank you
You've
very
heard
much.
that before, haven't you?
I have,
yeah.
Great, marvellous. Thank you for that. I'll have that again said back to me. What else do we like? I like Tolkien. I still love Tolkien. It was very much the fancy books when I was younger, and now actually I can't read anything fiction, really. It just doesn't do it for me. It all has to be non-fiction.
Oh, I like listening to non-fiction. I like sort of listening to podcasts or even on Audible. I don't use Audible anymore. I've kind of got fed up with that as well. But reading, it's fiction all the way. And, you know, when I was growing up, I really loved this set of books called The Saddle Club. And it was based in America. It was these three girls who all worked at horse riding stables, and they'd take the horses out and they'd go for ice creams and you kind of followed them. They started off about 10 years old and then they went up to teenage years. And I loved these books. I just consumed them like a monster and would imagine myself being part of the club and having a horse and going to the mall.
You know, my view that there are
mall,
girl books and boy books is getting strengthened by the second.
But I just think reading anything, you know, don't say to a kid you've got to read this technical thing. If a kid wants to read the Saddle Club or Babysitter's Club, that was a big thing. You're probably too young for this, but when I was growing up, you had these things called Point Horror and Point's Crime. They were brilliant. Anyway, but let kids read anything. Make it the thing that they enjoy. It is extremely good for them to have a good old read. And whatever it is they choose to read, as long as it's proper spelling and grammar, that is what's important. And little fact for you, ladies and gentlemen. The Saddle Club books that I'd accumulated throughout my adolescence did go to a good home. I gave them to Nigel Farage's daughter.
Oh.
Who is a keen horse rider. Anyway, there you go. Going to take a short break now, but after the break, we'd love to hear from you. Throw in your two-bit on anything we've been talking about so far in the show. 0344499 is the number to dial if you want to be patched through to the studio. Same on WhatsApp. That's the number to send me a message or leave me a voice note for text. It's 87222. You've got to put the word talk before your text. That makes sure it gets here. We're back after this.
Certainly up to 80 or 90 departures. And just to translate that, that's about 15,000 people who are waking up this morning where they didn't intend to be. And that is on top of the tens of thousands of people who over the weekend, from actually Friday afternoon through to Sunday, were prevented from getting to where they needed to be because of fog.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, hello. I just found out we're going to be losing Sam at 12 o'clock. So, Sam, it's over to you. You're going to be the one fielding the calls. And first up, here is Dave in London. Say hi to Sam. He's doing all the work for the next few minutes.
Hello, Dave. How are you?
Hi, Sam. How are you?
Very well. What would you like to say?
I called you up about a couple of months ago, both you and Alex, when you were both banging on about kids not working, how lazy they are, they need to get out and get a job and all this kind of stuff. But your logic isn't right. They're suffering from a chancellor that has just killed 200,000 retail jobs at the flick of a pen.
Yep.
Another 200,000 hospitality jobs will probably follow it.
Yep.
You can probably double that by May when these completely useless idiots carry on this policy just for the sake of it. You've then got millions of migrants coming in to do the jobs and take everything up, and then you just have a go at the youth of the country. And I just get a bit tired of it, that they've been dealt a worse situation than I was ever dealt. I'm in my 60s. Yes. It's far harder now than it was then. I'm sick and tired of people of 81 phoning up from Swansea, banging on about the good old days. The good old days are gone. They're dead and buried. There is nobody coming over the channel that's going to be a talk presenter, right, and take Alex's job. There's no one on one of those boats coming over that's going to take...
Tell you what might take my job. AI might probably do a better job, actually. Sam?
Well, my question for you is, are we not in a bit of a spiral here, in that we're constantly told when we try and say, oh, let's cut migration, let's clamp down on welfare, that British people don't want to do the jobs that we need migrants for. And there are jobs that aren't pleasant necessarily. They aren't the most fun, both in the care sector, which is very important work, probably needs to be paid more, but also things like fruit and vegetable picking, working in factories, that consistently employers turn around to us and say, oh, we can't find the Brits to do it. And don't we just need to draw a line in the sand somewhere, start from there, and then try and sort out the welfare system or the migration system?
Yeah. The line in the sand you need to draw is on the beach, down where the boats are coming in. That's where you need to draw the line. No. Before you jump in, Alex, and start going on about the fruit pickers, it ain't just about fruit pickers. My brother works in the care industry.
Yeah.
Right? They're now taking on more people, and they now want to reduce his hours and reduce his time. No, sorry.
No, I wasn't going to talk about the fruit pickers, actually. Thank you, Dave. What I was going to say is when I was growing up, I worked in Safeway, the supermarket, and I worked in pubs and nightclubs. I did admin jobs, data inputting for the NHS. And what is interesting, actually, is especially in retail, I think by and large outside of London, those jobs are still held by Brits. In London, well, no, there aren't Brits in London anymore, quite frankly. But what is staggering is hospitality. Why is it that even if you go to Bolton-on-the-Water, the person working in the pub is not going to be from Britain? I don't understand why the hospitality sector in particular seems to go after foreign workers. And, you know, Dave, you're absolutely right. It's wage compression. The jobs aren't necessarily available. They seem to rather... I mean, at the moment, a lot of Indians have come over to work in the hospitalities. I used to live in India. We love the Indians. But it strikes me that it's balmy when you've got, 16 to 25-year-olds. Those are exactly the jobs I had from the age of 16 to 22, pulling pints, serving dinners, and I loved it.
Yeah, but you're going back. You're going back to the good old days. You're 20, 30 years ago you're talking about.
Yeah, I know, but
did that too.
But why can't we go back to the good old days, though? Why can't a government turn around, cap legal migration and say to the hospitality sector, you're going to have to employ Brits, make them a better offer so they want to come and work for you? Well, frankly, I think that, the minimum wage now is pretty decent, but,
Yeah, then do it, but don't do it and tell us you're doing it, and then we find out that another million have turned up.
Yeah, no,
so
well...
It's just nonsense, and I'm getting quite sick of it, and I just think we need to focus on the people that are ruining the country, and it ain't 16 to 17, 24-year-olds laying in bed all day playing games. It's bigger people with bigger power.
Well, it is, and the fact that they lay in bed all day playing games is also something that should be bothering the bigger people with bigger power. Dave, thank you ever so much. We've got enough time to speak to Mike in Lancashire. Take it away, Sam and Mike.
Mike, what do you want to say?
Hi, Alex. Hi, Sam. Alex, it's a while since I spoke to you. I voted you as the gay goddess of talkTV.
I remember that. The sort of gay pin-up. I've got one sort of Freddie Mercury type jacket on today.
Yeah, Gate Pedal. You're looking gorgeous as usual.
Oh, thank you.
No, what is, Alex, going on about these kids and, younger people with mental health problems, blah, blah, blah. I've had mental health problems all my life.
Yeah.
I fought with bipolar
Yeah.
and stuff. I fought through it. I got over it. I've had so many fantastic jobs in my life.
Jobs help, don't they?
I worked for a major film star for 10 years.
Did you? So I want to get into all this, Mike. We're actually running out of time. The countdown started. But you're right. Work is dignifying. And thank you for coming to work today. You, Sam, dragging yourself away from doom scrolling to join me in the studio. It's been an honour and a privilege. Thanks for your call, Mike. We'll make it longer next time, shall we? Going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. One more hour to go.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or ball slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. An old friend has just come into the studio. This is like a bit of New Year poetry, isn't it?
It is. I like it. An ode.
An ode to Latha.
I like that.
Hello. I haven't seen you for a while.
I know, but it's good to be back with you.
It's so good to see you. You're the only Labour person who really passed muster.
Oh, you might get me cancelled by the comrades, Alex, if you keep me saying
That's okay. You can come join the dark side. Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to use this as a perfect segue.
Beautiful.
Because it turns out that Labour would lose 200 seats and almost a third of them to Reform if the election were held today. Now, look, this is no surprise to me. As someone who was eyeball deep in UKIP and looking at the polling and the general election results back in 2015, a third of UKIP votes came from Labour. Again, 2019, essentially when Boris Johnson got all those red wall seats, which Labour then won back, it's because Nigel Farage pretty much, put them in a nice shiny box with a big red ribbon and gave them to Boris Johnson, said, we're not going to stand here. Here you go, have them. So unless, you work in politics and haven't been paying attention, anybody in our line of work knows actually that when it comes to what's gone on politically, it's the left behind. It's almost the class system now, that the working classes, who were always the Labour vote, are more likely to vote Reform than Conservative, but they did lend their vote to Boris for a while. And now it seems that they're going back to Reform.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the map that this poll produces, it's absolutely extraordinary. You've got a kind of belt that sort of just about starts at the edge of Greater Manchester, but then goes sort of through South Yorkshire, across the sort of north of the Midlands in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, and then, across into Lincolnshire, which massively reflects those places that voted the heaviest to leave. So, I mean, look, I think the people who I don't think have had their eyes closed on this are those Labour MPs who had, who either a lot of them had near-death experiences, is how I would put it, in 2019, but survived, as you say, because Nigel stood down candidates, the Brexit Party candidates, and therefore a few people survived. And so what I'm going to say is that Labour is taking reform very, very seriously in terms of its electoral strategy. Whether Labour's taking reform sufficiently seriously in terms of its actual policy strategy, I think is another issue.
That's very important, isn't it? Because I say crack on and get on with making your mistakes, but the mistake that seems to be
well,
made...
they're doing that for you, Alex.
Yeah. The mistake that seems to be made repeatedly by politicians, and across the West, actually, because you're seeing this in the Netherlands, you're seeing it in France, is demonise, demonise, demonise. The parties who are standing up and saying about we really need to control our borders, we need to sort of, make what in the 21st century context feel like radical decisions, but 40 years ago it would have just been what, the decisions governments were making. It's name calling, it's finger pointing, but in doing that, you are alienating and ostracising those voters. It doesn't seem to occur to the wit of the Labour Party or really the Conservative Party, who give it a bit more lip service but then don't deliver, to actually turn around and go, oh, hold on, this is what this huge demographic wants. So shall we just try and do that?
Yeah, I think the key question is what Labour's going to do about immigration, because I think Labour's slightly got the memo on name calling. I think it's slightly looked at both Hillary Clinton and David Cameron. Remember when he called UKIP voters, what was it?
Fruitcakes, lunatics, and closet racists.
Exactly.
I remember those days.
I thought you'd have it down to a T. So I think that they kind of got the memo that what you shouldn't do is attack the voters. You shouldn't say that everybody who supports Nigel is a racist. Clearly when the riots happened, although obviously Labour was pretty firm on those who were doing the rioting. Keir did come out and say, just because you've got concerns doesn't mean you're a racist, and made that clear.
When did he say that? When did he make that clear?
He did say that. He said that, and he said it in the conference speech as well.
Why did he?
So I think they got the memo that you shouldn't demonise the voters, but I think they haven't got the memo that you have to actually do something to address those voters' concerns. So I think that's the issue. So at the moment, I think Labour isn't attacking potential reform voters. It isn't particularly attacking Nigel and reform. What I think it is at the moment is sitting back and watching a kind of, blue on turquoise battle. But I think that's a dangerous strategy because I think that the big danger at the next election is, which is what this poll shows, is that you could end up with Labour on I think there's a ceiling below which the Labour vote's hard for it to fall, which is sort of 28, 29, 30. We saw that in 2010 under Gordon Brown. There was a kind of hardcore Labour vote, particularly at the moment when Labour isn't losing too many votes to the left of the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems votes are coming in those posh bits of the home counties where they've got MPs. So they're seen in this poll as keeping most of those MPs that they got, because there are parts of the country which don't want, quite well-off parts of the country, very well-off parts of the country, which are uncomfortable with both reform and the Tories, but might have traditionally voted Tory.
Well, this is what I always say. The Conservatives need to be looking at what the Liberal Democrats are doing, because I think they actually ended up hemorrhaging more Tory heartland over to Sir Ed Action Man Davey.
Well, in 2015, when I worked for, in the 2015 election, I worked for Ed Miliband, we were, we did the traditional game. We went to all those swing seats in West Midlands, West Yorkshire, Lancashire, and we used to look at where David Cameron was and think, why is he back in the West Country sitting on a hay bale, talking to some farmers? And the reason is because in that election, which was when they went from having the coalition to winning not massive, but a workable majority, they did it by basically obliterating the Liberal Democrats. Yep. They basically they had a strategy that was 100% focused on that.
Very difficult in two-party politics. You move one side and say we want to obliterate the Liberal Democrats, and this flank is is then exposed, which are your working class sort of Thatcherite voters.
But some of whom would not be available to the Tories in any place. So that's
Right.
because there are, as you say, there are people who vote Reform who would never vote Tory. And when you just chat to people in those parts of the country, people come in and say, "Oh, I've seen you on the telly. Oh, yeah, I used to be Labour, but I'm now backing Nigel." They'd never vote Tory. They still instinctively and institutionally feel repelled by the Tory party. And of course, Reform comes without all that history.
It's amazing, actually, the number of people who just don't vote at all. That is the real sort of untapped resource when it comes to elections. I mean, you spoke about the riots there and sort of handling of those. And one person who definitely became proxy offended on behalf of the working classes was, of course, Elon Musk.
No irony there, Mr. Trillionaire Elon Musk.
But a man who, frankly, he sleeps on his floor when he works. He's quite a simple human, isn't he? In a not to his brain.
Yes. In terms of his way, his lifestyle.
He might be the richest man on earth, but he's hardly tooling around in a diamond-encrusted Tesla.
No,
he's t-shirt and jeans, man, isn't he? He's a geek. But anyway, look, he's got skin in the game. He doesn't like the idea that people be banged up in jail for social media posts because, guess what? He now owns a social media platform. But since Scotland has said, "Oh, come on, Elon, please build a Tesla factory up here, please," and he's just gone, "Really? After the way you lot have spoken about me? I don't think so, love." That's sort of praising what he said. But basically said few people are willing to invest in Britain under the current Labour government. And speaking to Baroness Claire Fox earlier, she made a very important point, which is, OK, the Labour Party go, "We're not inviting Musk to this, fine. We don't necessarily need him as an individual because all these other people have signed up and we did invite them."
This is the investment summit.
The investment summit. But the difficulty, of course, is he's very influential. There are reverberations. When Elon Musk says, "I don't like," other people go, "Well, if he doesn't like, I don't like."
Yes, I think that there's a danger now that Elon Musk was an outlier, and then, of course, now Trump is about to reassume power. I think what you've got is that kind of mainstream business opinion in America is now, doing its best to doff its cap, and I could say ruder things than that, but I won't, at lunchtime, to Trump and his acolytes to try and get back into the favoured circle. So therefore, what Musk says has a sort of trickle-down effect to other business leaders in a way it may not have had before Trump's victory. So I think, look, I think the government is right not to get into a direct row with Musk. It said that it would welcome his investment in Britain. I think it's rather unlikely at the moment.
But why wouldn't they welcome him to the investment summit then?
Well, I'm not sure that he actually had anything to come and deliver at the investment summit. So it was a kind of bit pointless.
Well, the richest man on earth who owns half a
the truth of the matter is he's got his battery plant, which is in Germany. He's trying to extend that, which is controversial in Germany. He's now major row in Germany this week because he did an op-ed for Welt am Sonntag, one of their big Sunday newspapers, saying that Germany was about to be sort of culturally obliterated. I praise thee again, but that it was on the verge of a crisis, and that the AfD is not a far-right organisation. Well, the Domestic Intelligence Service of the Federal Republic don't think that, as they have huge chunks of the AfD under surveillance. I think there's an argument whether you can call Giorgia Meloni in Italy far-right.
I thought the Germans weren't allowed to do surveillance. I thought that was the whole thing since what happened, that they're not allowed to spy on their own people.
There's lots of controls, but they are able to do surveillance. But I think there's a lot more sort of layers they have to go through, which proves exactly how many layers they've had to go through to do this. It's not on a whim against the AfD. So not only has the commentator of the newspaper resigned, but the whole of German politics has gone into apoplexy, which is obviously what Musk wants.
The commentator just had to resign?
Yeah, she was. It was obviously forced onto her by the owners, by the actual Springer company, the big sort of the German equivalent of Mr. Murdoch.
Kind of pops up what Elon Musk sort of says, really, isn't it? Which is there is no free speech. I want to voice an opinion. You don't have to agree with it. I'm the richest and most powerful man on earth. This is the opinion.
And now all the mainstream political leaders have reacted. So not only the Greens and the SPD, the Socialists, as you'd expect, but also the leader of the Christian Democrats, the Conservatives, who's expected almost certainly will top the poll. He's also said it was wrong to publish it. So, that's what's happening in Germany, where they've got this massive factory and the possibility of an extension. So he's getting even less. He's persona non grata in Germany. So he's running out of countries where he's welcome.
I doubt he's run. I doubt he is at all. I think he's probably very welcome in lots of places. Let's speak now about... we've had a bit of not a fiery debate, a sort of a strong-worded conversation with Dave in London just before you came in. And Dave was sort of saying that we've got to stop bashing young people for not working. The problem is, where do they go and work? You know, so many jobs are being given over to migrants these days. But we do have an issue with young people who say they don't want to go to work because of anxiety, because of mental health issues. And what do you think is the right approach there? Because clearly, I think it seems that the softly approach of, well, you're having a bad time, you've got a mental health crisis, so take some time, give yourself some space, put yourself first. I think this is where we've gone wrong. I actually think when it comes to sort of, you know, all the people going to speak to therapists, the me first mantra is kind of the problem here. That strife and struggle is a lot better for mental health than instant gratification.
Yeah, I think that, look, clearly what's happened is the new figures out today indicate that the number of 16 to 24-year-olds staying at home to look after families, women doing that, has basically halved. I think it's over about a decade, whereas the number of people in the same age group who can't work, who aren't in the labour market because of ill health, has skyrocketed, and most of that is down to mental health. I mean, I think we need to have a genuine and grown-up national conversation about this, where we don't stigmatise, as Dave said, we don't stigmatise young people, but we do have a conversation about why they're not entering the labour market, and you know, what support is needed for them. Because what worries me is actually for them is that if people have anxiety, and I think, you know, we've lived through the pandemic, and it's been a very strange few years for young people. These are the young people who were, what are we now, 3-4 years out from the pandemic, so these are sort of 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, so they were kind of right in the heart of their secondary education when the pandemic struck. I think it has been a very strange time. That doesn't mean that we can write off hundreds of thousands of people. We can't do that because we can't afford, as a country, just to be paying out benefits. We can't afford as a country because, despite everything, and despite migration, we still have in many areas a labour shortage, and we can't do it because we can't write them off in terms of their life chances by saying that they're just going to be stuck at home forever. And obviously all the evidence shows that if you're in work, that is often very helpful to your mental health, or obviously some people have mental health conditions that mean they can't work. And I'm worried at the moment that particularly was, you know, none of us can get a GP appointment, you know, when our arm's falling off. But actually, I did like, yes, absolutely. You know, so how much support is the NHS giving young people? Is it just sort of saying, oh, sign the piece? Remember in the 80s when, you know, there were...
Not really, because I was under the age of 10. I was born in 1983,
oh,
so...
You're so young, Alex.
I was knocking about in the 80s,
much younger
but
than me.
without...
Well, I'm so old. I was knocking about in the 80s, and the big thing then was, as the country deindustrialised, the sort of big belief then was that doctors in sort of coal mining, steel making areas, they were just signing people off work in their 50s because, you know, the full Monty, you know, like in the... They were signing people off at work because they thought there was never any prospect of them getting work. Is that happening now? Is it because it's the type of work that those people would be getting? So we need a grown-up conversation because this situation cannot be allowed to carry on.
I think I might have just had a light bulb moment in all of this.
Have you sorted the problem?
Yeah, I did this face earlier.
Is that
which meant that there was like a thought. Yeah, there was something. So it's like sort of something all connected in my head. And about this report, talking about how far fewer women are now staying at home to raise children or even having children. At the same time, worklessness has gone up because of mental health. And these things, I think, are directly connected. And I think that what we have a problem with in society is fear of failure. People who don't want to go to work because they don't think they're going to be good enough. They don't want to change their gender if they're women because they're not going to be attractive enough. I think people don't want to have children because they're scared. I mean, you go to Africa, you've got women crouching down in fields having babies, and they're not like, oh, I don't know if I'm up for the job, all my life's going to change inexorably if I have these children. They don't even have a clean water supply near them. Here, where you've got, you know, running water, electricity, roofs overhead, people, oh, I'm too scared, I'm not ready for children, I'm not ready to have children. It's this sort of lily-livered weakness, this fear. You know, people don't want to go to a job, anxiety. People don't want to have, you know, start a family, anxiety. We've all got... I think this is a result of things being too easy, but also as a result of everyone demanding too much perfection all the time.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a big question for society is that people now, the sort of imposter syndrome or just, you know, I'm not good enough syndrome is huge. I mean, and I think one of the things that the government has done is it has raised the minimum wage for young people, which is controversial with some business owners, not all, but some business owners. So at the moment there are 3 levels of the minimum wage: 16 to 18, 18 to 20, I think it's 21, maybe, and then the sort of the grown-up one, it may kick in a couple of years later. I may need to stand corrected on that, but basically what they've done is there used to be a huge differential between 16 and 18-year-olds. When the minimum wage came in, everybody said, well, look, 16-year-olds doing holiday jobs, making ice cream cones on the beach is not going to happen because the minimum wage is going to be. So it was kind of stepped in so that people didn't fall off a cliff. Now that it's being increased, so the gap is now very narrow, actually.
But are there really young people going, I'm going to go work in a pub now, I'm going to earn 2 pence more an hour?
Yeah, it's a bit more. I mean, other figures in front of me, but the gap is now, it's much more like, particularly for the above 18, it's now much more like the main minimum wage, which may mean that people feel that a life in work is better than a life on benefit in terms of the cash they can bring in. That's not a total solution, but I think it's a sensible thing to do. Look, and I think we also need to have a conversation about parenthood, because what we've had is this weird thing is that graduates, because obviously graduates, don't go into the labour market until their early 20s, particularly if people take a year out, etc. now, so 22, 23, and then so therefore graduate women are having children a lot later, and that of course seems to be those are the examples that most people see, and therefore I think what you've got is a range of people thinking, I've got to wait till my 20s and 30s, my 30s to have kids.
I think there's something else.
People now think it's weird if you have a kid at 21 or 22. You're almost like a gym. You're too young because you weren't around in the 80s, but a gym slip mum was the phrase when I was growing up.
I think there's something else going on here as well. This is happening all across the developed world. If you look at Japan, their birth rate's plummeted.
Absolutely.
It's happening all across the developed world, and I think it's something to do with the digitization of life. I can't quite put my finger on how or what, but I think there's something going on where we're less in our own bodies and in the present day. We're becoming dehumanized increasingly because of screens, because of the way we interact. So all the things that once made us human are sort of being dissolved, and I don't know, there's something funny happening.
Yeah, and I think as a society also, just on a more basic level, one of the great actually policy successes is in the 80s and 90s, teenage mums who people under
people thought that was going to be the big issue.
It was a major crisis. Peter Lilly stood up and sang a little song.
Overrun by teen mums.
Absolutely. And actually, what happened is that the rate of teenage pregnancies massively decreased. It was a success because that was the goal that we wanted, was fewer mums at 15, 16. I think maybe then one of the knock-on consequences is we've kind of scared the living daylights out of people about having kids, that they think they don't want to have them at 19, 20, 21.
So people don't want to have them at 40. This is the blimmin' problem.
We're not cheering ourselves up, are we? With just really 2 days left of the year, 36 hours left of this year.
Anyway, Matthew, it's been lovely having you here.
It's always a pleasure. Well, I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, I love it.
And
I love
Happy
it
New Year to you and everybody listening.
Happy New Year.
And watching.
Right, little break now, but after the break, I'd love to hear from you. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call, or WhatsApp, or voice note 87222 on the text. Put talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV. Hear from you after this.
talk about this mega poll because I think even Labour hardliners will be shocked to see that if there was an election tomorrow, not only would they lose their majority, but they would lose 200 seats and possibly more. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely right. No, I mean, it's highly encouraging for everybody who believes in the future of this country and wants it to succeed.
Yeah.
It's only been 6 months or so since Labour have got in, and even a kind of hardcore partisan like me didn't believe it would be this bad this fast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Let's hit up the phone lines and speak to Bex, who's in Essex. Hi, Bex.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, my darling. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So I was just wanting to call in and speak about the young people too ill to work situation.
Yeah.
Granted that I don't agree with obviously people being too, I don't agree with people faking illnesses to go on benefits in order to work. Obviously, if you are genuinely unwell and unfit to work, then I don't mind that. See, my problem is, I know you're focused on this, but my biggest focus is on the people breaking into our country on a daily basis. As a taxpayer, I'm self-employed, I'm a taxpayer. Why I don't want my taxpayers' money going to pay for these illegal immigrants coming into our country and living more lavish lifestyles than many British people who actually live here. That is what angers me about where my tax money goes, rather than on young people who are, let's say, too ill or too lazy to work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And it's utterly ridiculous. We've discussed it a lot in this show that no government seems to have grabbed the nettle and said, you know what, every nation has the right to defend its borders. That's written into the UN definition of what a nation state is. We have territorial waters. We'd have every right, frankly, to turn around to France and say, oh, by the way, this accidentally slipped out of your territory into ours and wasn't supposed to. Would you like it back? And it beggars belief that no government seems to have actually done the one thing that would reverse or at least begin to halt the mass flow of people, which is just stop it happening. If you've got a leak in your bathtub, you put a plaster over where the leak is. You stop the water coming out. And that is the one thing. Everything else is being done and fiddled with around the edges. The one thing that would actually work, which is to say you can't come in, isn't being done. I just hope, and I don't know what you think about this, Bex, but I just hope that with Donald Trump having to tackle this with America's borders, he may indeed take some more radical decisions than we have seen in recent years and kind of be the first domino, really, create a political impetus or at least political cover for other people to follow suit.
Yeah, I think that I'm hoping that the presence of Donald Trump will actually have a big impact on what's going here. Also, I think because Christmas has been going on, and that's a big distraction for most people. People haven't really been doing anything to say fight back against the government in terms of what they're doing. And I feel like as the new year comes in and the dust settles, Christmas is gone, people will really start to feel the effects of Stalin's New Britain. And I think that's when people really start to make a stand against him. He has to go. We cannot. The country, I can't imagine what it's going to be like.
We've got a lot of time until the next election. That's the only thing. It's not really technically anyway to oust him before that date. But if rumours are to be believed, he could be in a sticky situation in February after that Southport trial. So let us see how it all pans out. We could have some spicy news months ahead of us. Bex, it's been wonderful talking to you. My sort of Cape Canaveral's lighting up here. So let's take a call now from Tracy, who's in Northampton. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Tracy. Becky, absolutely wonderful. I was honestly thinking I was on my own in how I feel about my country. What angers me is the fact that why aren't the French helping us stop them coming from France. That's what I can't get over. And
well, because they don't really, they kind of want them to, because then it becomes our problem, not theirs, because all the migrants in France.
So why can't we? Look, we've done a petition. We've tried to be outspoken about this on radio stations, everywhere. Especially me, I'm the worst to get on to your radio station and have a go and say, look, this ain't our Britain anymore. You let any more people in. Well, it isn't Britain anymore. I don't feel that this is my country anymore. Everywhere you go, there is immigrants. And yes, I don't like them. I don't want them in my country.
I think there are a lot of people who feel that the vast speed of demographic change happening is unsettling. And it's funny, every time people have the conversation, and it's not just that, in terms of people coming over in boats, it's illegal, it's criminal, it's dangerous. Frankly, it needs to be stopped because it makes a mockery of border control, full stop. But it's a drop in the ocean compared to the number of people being allowed into the country legally. And very often when we talk about immigration, we've always been told, oh, it's good for the economy, it's important for the country's GDP. Well, even those arguments don't pass muster anymore, because we learn that GDP per capita is hugely impacted by immigration. Germany did an economic impact of immigration and calculated the billions and billions of euros they had lost as a result of legal migration. But the conversation we're still not allowed to have, which I say ignore at your peril to those in authority, is how people feel about this socially, how people feel about the demographic change, especially when people come from a town where they remember. I'm going to give you an example here, okay? So my other half was born and bred in Ealing, and remembers when he was a kid walking his granny up to Marks and Spencer so she could get a pint of milk and the newspaper. And it was quite a desirable place to live then, sort of Ealing Village. It was young professionals and the middle classes, and Ealing was a proper stand-up job, you know. It was and he remembers all the little shops. He remembers seeing, you know, Mrs. Cooper, you know, with pulling her shopping basket, and this neighbour and that neighbour. His family still have a property in Ealing, which he went to check over Christmas, and he said, you don't see anybody anymore who seems to be British. They just aren't there. There's no Brits anymore in Ealing. And what's worse is a big part of the high street or the main thoroughfare have now got all those tents on them. Now, he's the same age as me. We're talking about a period of about, 3-4 decades that has happened. And, the authorities have to address the fact that people are never going to be comfortable with this. We're humans. We can't help the way we're wired, okay? We're pack animals, right? We're a bit like lions who exist in prides. Since time immemorial, different clans of Scotland have fought. Nations have, locked horns and battled over resources. It's kind of hardwired into us to not want to cede our territory, our land, our resources to completely other people, rival people, if you will. It's going to be very difficult to reprogram the human brain to think any differently, although this is very much what they seem to be trying to do, unless they really grab the nettle on this and allow people to have a conversation about the cultural and societal impact of mass immigration, as well as the economic one. I fear we're building up a huge underbelly of resentment that, if that actually gains in strength and overflows, could be really very ugly. Tracy, thank you ever so much for your call. Right, we're going to take a short break now. It's been fantastic hearing from all of you today. Lots of great opinions, but when we come back, a man who, I had him on just the other day before the weekend, Greg Swenson. He's going to be telling us all about Jimmy Carter, of course. The former US president has died at the age of 100. Decent innings there. Joe Biden still believes he could have beaten Donald Trump, and there's a battle going on all about visas in America for tech workers. And also, if you happen to be listening as well, just before the weekend, I had Gawain Farage, I was going to call him then. Gawain Tola in, my old mucker, my old friend. We both worked at UKIP together in those heady days, former advisor to Nigel Farage. He's going to be in talking about what is going on with reform. And on Friday, we kind of had them in with Big Phil in the studio all at the same time. And it was brilliant. Oh, the chat was flowing. Everyone was bouncing off each other. So I said to Elise, who's producing me, can we do that again? And we're going to do it again after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
All right, look who's in the studio. Put your phone down, Greg. Put your phone down, Gawain. Sit up. Straight shoulders.
Yes, Mum.
Shoulders.
Yeah.
Straight
Yes,
shoulders.
miss.
Yeah, right. Good. You're in the class of Alex now. Very nice. No, we just enjoyed having you both around on Friday. We did all go to the pub afterwards as well, which was also enjoyable.
Shocking.
Maybe it will happen again. I don't know. Who can predict? I got into a fight, obviously.
Clearly, you should see his face.
Yeah, Gawain lost his clothes and had to go for a charity shop. Again. But we just thought we'd do it all over. So here we go. I've got a sort of selection of stories here. Did I introduce them yet? Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas, Gawain Tola, former advisor to Nigel Farage. I don't know if I got round to doing that.
I'm not
it's
a
just
veteran
like
this time.
G
this
and
is
G.
good.
Greg and Gawain.
This is step up.
Right. Let's start off with the big news today. We haven't even spoken about this yet on the show. Is Jimmy Carter has died at the age of 100. Well before my time. In your time, though, I think. Was
Barely.
he good president? He did one term, didn't he? Good pres?
No, he was not.
I like this. When someone dies and normally have to go, they were really
I'm
great.
trying to be polite about it. But, you know, the best thing that happened to Jimmy Carter was Joe Biden. Because for a long time, he was considered the worst president in postmodern history. But now you have Joe Biden, who is clearly, I mean, any comparison between Biden and Carter, I think, is an insult to Jimmy Carter. He was a really good man. He was a religious man. He was a family man, evangelical Christian, served his country. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy. He enrolled in the academy during World War II, graduated right at the end, but served his country, a nuclear submarine engineer. So, you know, a good man, but he was not a great president, that's for sure.
What made him rubbish? What did he do wrong?
Well, he didn't really demonstrate great leadership. Some of the problems he inherited, to be fair to him, you know, the inflation was already in place. He made it worse. You know, it was a difficult time geopolitically. You had the Soviets were expanding all over the world. They invaded Afghanistan. Then you had the crisis in Iran, the hostage crisis, where the students basically took embassy employees hostage for over 400 days. And then released them the day of the inauguration of Ronald Reagan. So, I mean, so the difference between Carter and Biden is Carter inherited a lot of the problems. He didn't handle them particularly well, but Biden really created his problems, you know, opened the border on purpose, created the inflation. So Carter was facing a difficult term, whether he was good at it or not. He lost 44 states in 1980 to Ronald Reagan. For an incumbent president to only win 6 states is pretty shocking. But his post White House career, he made a decent legacy, mixed perhaps, but a decent legacy for himself. He was charitable. He built homes for, you know, he founded Habitat for Humanity. So he did some good things post White House.
He did the largest ever presidential pardon, which I think was probably the right thing when he pardoned those people who'd gone abroad to dodge the Vietnam draft.
Right.
Now, at the time, that was contentious, of course, but in hindsight, I think it was probably a good thing. But the Iran situation was awful, but he was a little bit like Ark Callahan. He inherited the disasters of the oil war of the early 70s and had to deal with the economic fallout of that. But what he did do in some ways is prepare the ground for the Reagan presidency. Because he was so bad, Reagan came in and had a lot of leeway to work with. And thinking of his post-presidential period, yes, the good man aspect, domestically, there was a lot of good he did. However, internationally, he made one of the most catastrophic mistakes of all time, which was basically stopping the attempt to stop North Korea to get nuclear weapons. He went to North Korea at the time that the American government were trying to find a way to block North Korea from getting nuclear weapons, and his appearance in Pyongyang stymied that attempt. And now we have a lunatic in Pyongyang with nuclear weapons. And that's largely down to...
He accelerated the path to nuclear weapons.
That was a disaster.
And by the way, Bill Clinton was president at the time. You know, the same party.
By the way, he went to hospital, isn't he?
This is not a good day for Democratic presidents.
No, I guess not.
How is Bill? Do we know? Any updates?
I think he's left the hospital.
Oh, he's out, is he?
Yeah, so he's fine. But it was a real...
misanthropic obituary we're doing.
but it was a real
man in
it was a
many
real
ways.
insult to Clinton. You know, when Clinton was president and trying to negotiate and do something positive with North Korea, and then Jimmy Carter shows up with a CNN film crew and cuts his own deal. And so it was really, not only was it a horrible deal, but he should have never been in that position in the first place without permission from the president.
Like many Democratic presidents, it's their foreign policy that seems to stand up as their bad bits.
Yeah.
Admittedly, as a Brit, we only see their foreign policy. We don't really see what goes on internally and economically. But what we perceive is their foreign policy, and both, Carter's foreign policy, from the UK perspective, from the global perspective, was disastrous.
It was really bad news. And domestically, he also he failed to take price controls off of oil and gas. So that just made gas prices higher, gasoline and petrol prices higher. And so he could have done much better domestically. Now, he did start the deregulation process, which really
Reagan
paved the way for
up.
Reagan. Yeah.
But I mean,
so he deregulated trucking and rails and air.
I feel like if I was going to do a headline for this misanthropic obituary, it's like, good man, rubbish president.
Yes.
But do you think what's interesting here, it's something that I think is sort of quite reflective on what we see going on today, is personality in politics. There's been this huge emphasis, hasn't there, that politicians need to be nice, that we're going to judge them if they've done this or that, and they have to say, I've gone to a Taylor Swift concert, I plait my kids' hair, look at me cooking dinner, rolling my sleeves up, I'm not even wearing a tie. And yet, you know, and everyone goes, oh, Donald Trump, psychopath, Nigel Farage, monster. And you talk about the foreign policy there, and again, it comes down to this idea that actually I don't care if the president is nice or knows how to bake cookies and gives his children, you know, a glass of milk in the morning and kisses them on the head at night. I just want him to make sure there's not World War III. And actually, it might help to be a bit of a maniac in doing that.
Starmer and the Mauritian situation is what you get when you're trying to be nice to the world. It's a colossal error, colossal mistake. It is not the business of a British Prime Minister or an American President to be nice to the rest of the world. It's the business of them to make the world safe. And you don't do that by cuddling and saying anything you want, Gov.
Now, talking about making the world safe. Joe Biden apparently said he still believes he could have beaten Trump if he stayed. Kind of sounds like he's regretting not competing not competing in that election. Mate, you wouldn't have even been awake for it. I mean,
I'd have loved the second debate.
I know, right?
That would have been a trip. I mean, you know, he's just delusional. And what happened too is he might be delusional because his inner circle was protecting him so much because of his cognitive issues that they weren't showing him the polling, even internal polling. So anytime a poll came out showing Trump up 5 points, his inner circle made sure he didn't see it.
Have you seen Goodbye Stalin, the film?
I have not.
Oh, it's a
I saw it in a charity shop on DVD.
This old lady wakes up after a coma after the end of the GDR, and her family, and she would be really upset if she discovered that, in fact, East Germany had fallen. And so therefore her children fake videos about how wonderful the GDR's going on, and they basically, she doesn't realise, she's in her flat and she doesn't realise it's 4 years after the fall of the wall. And it's the same sort of situation for Biden.
I must see it. And Biden, he also reminds me of the book, I forget the author's name, but Peter Sellers played him in the movie. It was called Being There, where they found a learning challenged gardener in a senator's house who had just died, and they made him the next candidate.
Right.
And they just created this whole illusion, which is really what they did for Kamala and Joe, both of them. But
rubbish candidates,
both were going to lose.
But they were just, you know, sort of puppets, like ventriloquist dolls.
Yeah, but nice.
Oh, nice, always nice.
Always nice. Biden, of course, always likes a young person. There's that.
Oh, go away! Come on, I don't want to be off. I mean, you know, I was hoping to get to 2025, like getting into serious
without
trouble.
another fine.
I think you've just sort of stymied my chances. Do you think Joe Biden was so demented he didn't know he was demented? Is that like we've reached that level probably with him? Oh well. Listen, Greg, you've got to explain to me this battle going on over H-1B visas. That to me sounds like a type of pencil. What's an H-1B visa? Who wants it? Who does it? And why are they fighting?
So those are visas that are designed for high quality, highly educated tech workers to enter the country, not coming in on a boat across the English Channel, not coming across the open border, you know, with Mexico. The idea is, let's bring in top-tier talent. It's been around for a while. It's useful.
Elon Musk, in fact, had one when he was younger.
I was going to say, he's prime example coming from South Africa.
It's not perfect. It's prone to abuse. You know, you have some workers that are not qualified, but they juice up their resume or whatever, and they're able to exploit that particular visa. It's a very small number. What did you tell me?
65,000 people per annum, of which Tesla has 760, I think.
Right.
But of that 65,000, it's a 3-year visa. Short term, you can apply for another 3 years, and you can, after those 2 sections, apply for a green card. But it's 65,000 in a country of 350 million.
Yeah, so
that's about the same level.
Who's annoyed about these things? Who says that we shouldn't have them? Why is there this?
Because the sort of far right,
the Steve Bannon-esque
MAGA crowd,
hard right MAGA,
that are just anti-immigration. Period.
Full stop.
Whereas most Republicans are anti-illegal immigration.
100%.
And I think even most Americans.
And the big question is, of course, whose side is Trump going to take?
Well, Trump has already gone publicly in backing Musk.
Yeah.
Right.
And Vivek.
He told the New York Post that he likes it.
I kind of feel like with the American dream, it's built on that. And it's the same as Britain. We've always said, if we've got the best universities, if we get the top sort of nuclear physicists from Czech Republic wanting to come here,
let them stay.
Roll out the red carpet.
What Starmer should be aware of, and what our government should be aware of, as senior people in the Trump's incoming cabinet have been talking about this soft pencil visa and saying that Britain is a place that they will be looking for these top quality immigrants from. In that 65,000, they are looking to our city. They're looking to our tech sector, biggest tech sector in Europe.
No,
they're looking to our talented people.
People out there don't realise that the UK is a world leader in fintech, a world leader in AI.
And America is looking with very, very hungry eyes at the talent here. Now, if you were to set up,
Elon, I don't know how
yeah.
to operate Windows Vista, but I wouldn't mind coming.
Yeah, well, but if you were a very talented tech type person,
which I am not, alas.
But if you were, and you wish to set up a business, would you do it in London?
Oh no, I'd be gone.
Of course not.
Or would you do it in the States?
Oh my goodness!
If the States is willing to have you,
but not just anywhere in Europe. There is no .com anything out of Europe. Everything is everywhere else.
So, it is ill behaved. We have to be on our mettle, not to lose. We talk about wanting the talent to come to Britain. That's not what's happening. Not with these NIC. Not with these with the budget. We're going to be losing talent to America.
Yeah,
that's already happened in the health sector.
Young, ambitious, innovative people want to move to America.
Yeah.
There's an appetite for risk-taking.
We're going to lose our fintech. We're going to lose those areas. We are actually still world leaders.
Yeah.
We're going to lose that because America is looking at us and saying, "Come on over."
Well, there you go.
It's such a shame because there's so many smart people here, but it's the anti-business sentiment from both parties or both major parties.
As Elon Musk himself has said, right, guys, we're going to take a break now. When we come back, and we're going to flip it back to this side of the pond and get an American take on what's going on in UK politics. We're back after this.
what do you make of this Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage feud? Because it seems to me most people looking at it say it wasn't really necessary. Kemi Badenoch didn't need to do it. She didn't need to raise the problem. She didn't need to raise the issue that many, many more people who used to vote Conservative are now going to vote Reform.
So we speak to Reform people, they're like, thank you, Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah.
You've done us a huge favour. This story was going away. Yes, we had our surge in numbers. Yes, we'd overtaken you. And just with your tweet on Boxing Day, you just gave us another week of coverage. Thank you so much.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Greg's got a fun fact for you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Swenson.
Yeah, it is that Europe has created 14 companies worth more than 10 billion in the last 50 years, worth about 400 billion total. And in America, they've created 250 of those companies worth 30 trillion. So it just points to the appetite for business and for wealth creation.
And this is it. People might go, oh, but Americans are much bigger. No, not if you add together all of Europe, because the whole population of the EU at one point was what, Green? 500 million odd? And
then we came out, so it's about 460.
Yeah, and America is about 300 million. Yeah, so that's 10 versus 250.
You've also got to remember, when sort of mobile technology was growing, and who were the world-beating companies?
Yeah, Ericsson,
Nokia.
Yeah.
These were European companies.
Yeah.
Where are they now?
Yeah, gone. Yeah. Well, the bit we should be leading the way on small modular reactors, because we've got the technology.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why people don't tend to know this, but when Australia said to France, not going to buy your submarines anymore, it's because they still need to fill them up with a gas oil pipe, you know, and whereas ours work on little nuclear reactors, they can stay under the ocean.
I know that there are plans to build 3 in Wales, but the Welsh government and the British government are dragging their feet through these SMG reactors. Cause we prefer green technology, but they ain't now so green as nuclear.
Yeah, exactly.
Particularly the small ones.
Yeah, no, exactly.
They're not. It's not 3 Mile Island.
So many people in politics are just thick, aren't
they? It's just hostility to the private sector.
It's risk averse, unless it's doing dreadful things to our tax and tax system and school system.
It infuriates me. I've worked with people for a long time on the whole SMR thing, and Japan, who have had in living history a nuclear
the tsunami.
The tsunami. Yeah. Japan have been saying to this American UK consortium, who said we can build SMRs. We want to sign an MOU, but we're waiting for the UK government to do it. Why don't you want this yourself? Yeah. And you just think, blimmin' heck, Japan know a thing or two about nuclear disasters, and they're like, we want this technology.
They're prepared to work with us.
Desperate for it.
And they're prepared to work with us.
Yeah.
And it's just our bureaucratic system. It's our nightmare planning system.
Over-regulation.
And it's our fear of innovation, fear of the future.
And if you are successful, they will take half of your money.
Yeah.
Well, there's that. But it seems to be, we have a government and a bureaucratic world. We were talking about Quangos the other day. We have a government that is looking at yesterday's solutions to last Thursday's problems.
Yeah. No,
and that is the major problem.
Agree. There's nobody forward thinking anymore. OK, let's talk about how things might be changing politically here. Labour would lose about a third of their seats to Reform if an election were held today. Again, this is something we spoke about last time you were in the studio, because everyone goes, oh, it's a battle on the right. No, it's not.
If you look at the map, if you look at the map of the... look, this is 4 years out. Yeah. It's 4 years away from an election. Let's not take this too seriously. As I always say, never believe a poll that makes you smile.
It's 4 years out, but the same as it was 10 years ago.
True, things are changing. The trajectory is in that direction, but I think my dictum of never believe a poll that makes you smile stands. That being said, the massive MRP poll...
You are talking about a POLL, not someone from Poland.
I quite like some. That's many polls.
Never
make me
believe a
smile.
poll that makes you smile.
There's many polls that make me smile. Chopin, for example, is a poll that makes me smile. But the point being is that whilst everything has to be taken with a great mound of salt, Malden sea salt, I would say, but a mound of salt nonetheless, the trajectory is going in that direction. If you look at that map, and don't just look at the 70-odd seats that they say Reform are going to win under the current situation. That's at 21. This was numbers. This poll, the numbers were counted on the 16th of December. Now, has anything happened between the Tories and Reform in between that time that might have changed those numbers in the meantime? Well, possibly. But two things are very important. One, those 70, mostly in the South Yorkshire, Derbyshire area, and in the Sunderland, Newcastle, North East coalfields. They're red wall areas, proper red wall areas. This is Reform against Labour. Then you look at the second places of Reform, and up from 98, it's hundreds. And that's against Tories as well, it's against Lib Dems as well. This is a significant sea change. Then, if you listen to the director, Luke Trill, the director of More in Common, who did the poll, I think a third of the seats have a less than 5% majority across the board.
Right.
So
they're very
the
tiny
margins are tiny. 2% going one way, 1% going the other,
and it's changed,
complete change. The kaleidoscope, the shaken kaleidoscope of British politics is constantly changeable.
Yeah.
But the one thing that seems to be absolutely certain is Labour's fallen off a cliff, the Tories are bubbling along in the centre, and Reform is climbing. Those are the only things that are transparently true across the board of old politics.
You gave me a little bit of information which I didn't know during the advert break about Alison Pearson. I love her, she's a dear friend, but I didn't know this. Top columnist at The Telegraph, of course, was the one who had the police come and knock at her door because she had apparently written a tweet. What tweet did I write? We can't tell you that. So what, you want to drag me down to the cop shop, interview me for a non-crime hate incident?
It's not the accuser, it's the victim.
But Alison might have a plan.
She does. Well, according to what she told the Trigonometry podcast in the last week or so, right at the end of the hour of the conversation, she is asked about this, and she says that if the Tories don't stand the current Police and Crime Commissioner in Essex down, she will stand for Reform.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the changes...
She'd make a good Police and Crime Commissioner, actually.
But we must obviously say the changes that the government are trying to plan, the ones that push back elections in various counties,
that's really
they might be taking out the position of Police and Crime Commissioner in many of these things. If you have a mayor, does the mayor then, like in London, become the Police and Crime Commissioner for that jurisdiction?
It's a bit funny,
it's a bit
isn't
up
it?
in
Sort of
the air,
wanting to change all of that just before the election.
But this is also weird and wrong, but the fact is she was very public that she said she would stand for Reform if this guy doesn't stand down as the Police and Crime Commissioner. I'd be delighted.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you make of the movements of Reform and what's going on in politics in general?
They're clearly on a roll, and Nigel and the whole group have done a fantastic job, including you, Gwen.
No, it was after my time.
But really, I mean,
the
question I have is can the Tories and Reform ever kiss and make up and merge? That's the best.
I think we're dancing in different ballrooms at present.
Yeah.
However, what happens the day after the general election? I don't know, but there's no way that they're going to be marking each other's dance card for a long time.
It'd be politically fatal for any party
Reform
at this stage
has
to bug it with any other party.
It has polling numbers. It does not have elections, and in between